Namaste to all of you. Very warm welcome to this evening's call. Friends, as you are all aware, for the past more than 60 days, we have been doing a call every single day. And we've been fortunate that we have had very illustrious, intellectuals who came onto our call, gave their views and enriched all of us in this otherwise gloomy period of lockdown. Friends, today we have Professor M.D. Nalapat. Before I introduce him, I'll just briefly introduce about our organization, and then we'll go into the today's current topic. Friends, Pragna Bharati was founded 28 years back as an intellectual forum for the nationalistic thinkers. This was founded by 5 intellectuals based out of Andhra Pradesh, Hyderabad. Dr. T. Hanuman Chaudhary, he was a former chairman of VSNL and is a Padma Shri awardee. He is our chairman. And then Ram Madhav ji. Ram Madhav ji is currently General Secretary for BJP National General Secretary. Then B.S. Sharma ji is a pharmaceutical professional. He is on the call today with us. And 2 more very senior intellectuals who are no more with us, Vakadi Panduranga Rao ji and Harihara Sharma ji. So these 5 people had started Pragna Bharati as a nationalistic thinkers forum to provide the real nationalistic outlook among intellectuals. Otherwise, intellectualism was being hijacked by people who are not so friendly to the nationalistic viewpoint. That was the main purpose for which this was started. We work among intellectuals to try and bring them into an Indian way of looking at things, into a nationalistic perspective. And we also work among people who are activists or who are working for the nation, but who may not be empowered with intellect or information on any particular subject. So we would provide them that information so they're empowered to handle the fields where they're working. We also run a monthly English magazine, which is called Bharati Pragna. And we have, we also award, we give a award every year, what we call as Pragna Puraskar Award. Last awardee, last person who got that award was Dr. Satish Reddy, who, as you all know, is a scientific advisor to the Prime Minister. And he is also involved in the missile navigation technology. He's a pioneer in that. After Abdul Kalam ji left, it is Satish Reddy who's doing that right now. Friends, this is a brief introduction about ourselves. Request those of you who have not subscribed to our magazine, kindly do subscribe to us. And also our social media assets, be it Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, or our email ID. Please kindly write to us, subscribe to us, and then like our pages so that we can be in touch. Friends, today we have amongst us Professor M.D. Nalapat, Madhav Das Nalapat ji. Actually, he doesn't need introduction because we are all so proud of him. We keep following him. Every talk that he gives is such a respectable, a big, knowledgeable voice that this country has. He comes from a royal family from Kerala, and though he's done his studies in economics, he is now one of the sanest voices in geopolitical and strategic affairs in India. We see him on several TV debates and on P-Gurus or in NewsX or so many things. And he writes in The Guardian. And he's been the prolific writer who's been writing for several years now. And then he has been there, he's seen it right from Indira Gandhi's days at the corridors of power, and his understanding of the goings on in the geopolitical scene of Bharat is unparalleled. We are really fortunate to have him here with us today. And today he's going to talk about the Akhand role. So we are not calling it Akhand Bharat per se, but Bharat has a significant role in the world affairs, especially in the area which originally was called Akhand Bharat. So today he's going to walk us through that. And of course, it is very crucial for us today as China is staring at us, and we do have some potential war clouds looming around. This is a time when it is time for us to understand what is happening, and then what is the way ahead for us. So no better person to talk about this than Nalapat ji. Professor Nalapat ji, welcome to Pragna Bharati, and thank you so much for consenting. I know today would be a hot day for you. So many channels would be after you, but then you consented to come. It's an honor for us. The floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Giridhar. It is actually, the honor is mine because, individuals make a difference. I've always felt that. And each of you as individuals have made a difference and will make a difference, I'm sure, in the future in our country and externally. I would just like to say that why did we subject this particular subject? The title is basically reflective of the fact that from the 1980s onwards, I have been speaking about China as the next superpower, in a sense, predicting the fall of the Soviet Union, although I must confess I didn't expect Mr. Gorbachev to do such a comprehensive job so quickly. I thought it would last for at least a decade more, but Mr. Gorbachev was extremely successful. But I was very clear that from then, that China would come as the next superpower, especially after the Deng reforms, etc., got introduced, his activities and other things. From the 1990s, if you check my writings in the Times of India, for example, I have consistently regarded India as the third superpower. Spoken about India as the third superpower, India as India first in that sense. And when I say India first, frankly, it doesn't mean anything that is triumphalist or in any way, if I may say so, the negative connotation that is sometimes used to to China first or India first or US first. First of all, for example, Donald Trump. And I must confess that with all my criticism of some of his actions, I still believe Donald Trump is a good man. I still believe he's a friendly man. And unless Joe Biden chooses a really good vice presidential candidate, he will by far be the best man for India as the president of the United States. So in the sense, his re-election. But what I want to say is that China did not become the world's next superpower. It is today the world's superpower. It is acknowledged as such. I remember when I used to go to China, and people in China, used to be very polite, but they used to speak in Chinese that, look, this gentleman doesn't know what he's talking about. We as a superpower. He doesn't know the poverty in our villages. He doesn't know the pathetic state of our technology. Everything around us is imported. And these are the comments they used to make when I used to talk about them as a future superpower. And then, of course, after the Hong Kong handover, 1997, a psychological change came across the country. And from then on, in fact, they started becoming more confident of not only of themselves, but their technology and subsequently even their history and tradition. You know that Chairman Mao, for example, demolished old traditions. I mean, like the Taliban, finished off the Bamiyan Buddha. A lot of Bamiyan Buddhas were completely destroyed by Chairman Mao, including in the vicinity of Beijing and everywhere else, because he said, the olds are evil. Forget the olds, turn to the new. And he went ahead with that. But after 97, after the Hong Kong handover, there was a subtle change in the mentality and the mindsets of the Chinese people. And a subtle amount of confidence came to them. And frankly, because of the reform, Chairman Mao completely destroyed the Communist Party of China leadership. The leadership hated him. He was too quirky. He was too arrogant. He was too conceited. He behaved like an emperor, which basically means the only person whom he consulted to take decisions, and here he reminds me of Jawaharlal Nehru, for example, was himself. So the people, his advisors, were people who basically reflected his views, whether they meant it or not. What they talked was what they knew Chairman Mao would talk and wanted to hear. So from 20 people, he got the same view, which was his view. So he said, yes, I think you're all right. Now I come to the same view as all you 20. But anyway, may I say that, that complete destruction of the Communist Party leadership opened the door for Deng Xiaoping to go in for reforms, which are anything but Marxist. I remember in my early visits to China, I used to go to bookshops. And China, everything is basically owned by the Communist Party. I mean, even, the smallest businesses have got to have a party link. And bookshops, are so important in the Chinese scheme of things that they would definitely have a strong degree of party oversight and control. And I used to ask for Karl Marx. I used to ask for the writings of Friedrich Engels. And many of them thought Karl Marx was a Hollywood star. So they would give me books about movies in America. And they gave me books about, in German, for example, that Engels was a German literature writer. So that is their concept of Marxism, that German literary writing or a movie star in Hollywood. Marx was the movie star and Engels was a literary writer. But what I'm trying to say is that what did the Chinese do? And I would like to say, Girdhar, very clearly, one has to learn not only from one's own mistakes of others, and one has to learn from the path taken by others. That's what, for example, the Japanese did during the Meiji Restoration. When I went to Japan first time, I requested that I want to go to the tomb of Emperor Meiji. And I paid my respects to the tomb of Emperor Meiji. Just as when I went to Beijing for the first time, I said I want to go to the Forbidden City. And I want to pay my respects to the emperor who lives still, whose spirit is in the Forbidden City. And I must tell you, Girdhar, maybe I'm being superstitious or silly. I felt a cool wind and breeze blow over me as I left the Forbidden City. And I felt that this is the blessing of the emperor, who's in the Forbidden City. Frankly, you get that feeling, for example, Mansarovar. You look at Mount Kailash. And I can say I've only gone once. I can go again, but I would never dare to go again because I don't even deserve to see Lord Shiva's abode once. I somehow, basically undeservingly, I went there. But, when you look on Mansarovar, when you look at the lake, when you look at Mount Kailash, you know that Lord Shiva is there. You can sense the pulsing of Lord Shiva's heart on the mountain. It's something which, frankly, I cannot write about it. My wife, Lakshmi, has written a long travelogue about it, which we published in the Sunday Guardian. But I cannot write about it, frankly. It is just too much for me to write about. But what I'm saying is, you know what I mean, And the reality is we have to learn from the mistakes we make. And most importantly, what we have to learn is to seize the opportunities available. It is not an accident that when Deng Xiaoping began his odyssey to make China a developed country. Now, Chairman Mao, you have a lot of people who say, things about him, he did this, he did that. And yes, absolutely. He did this, he did that, he did a lot of terrible things. But the reality is that, Inner Mongolia, Manchuria, Xinjiang, Tibet, all these locations. Let's talk honestly. Aksai Chin, all these areas came under the control of Beijing, and the empire became much bigger than the territorial extent of any previous Chinese empire, to my way of study and reflection. So that's what Mao did. Like Julius Caesar, he built an empire. And that empire, frankly, his economic policies were horrible. But our India, the subcontinent is such a beautiful geopolitical construct. On the one side, you have Myanmar. On the other side, you have Pakistan and Afghanistan. And in between, you have the Indian subcontinent. And this entire subcontinent is such a powerful geopolitical entity that I am convinced that one day, all the people living in these different states will understand the imperative of working together and will come together, at least in a lot of joint operations. I am hopeful of that. because I can tell you from the point of view of geopolitics, Mao made China what it is today. Abraham Lincoln made the United States what it is today. When there was an effort of secession by the southern states, there was a lot of pressure on Lincoln by his own party, the Republican Party. I'm not talking about Democrats who are pro-slavery. The Republican Party, which claimed to be anti-slavery, told Lincoln, what are you worried about? For God's sake, let's allow slavery in the South. But Lincoln said, no, I will not allow slavery in the South. He got past the Emancipation Proclamation, which completely closed the door on reconciliation with the South, which is what Lincoln wanted. You go and look at Winston Churchill. I have frankly, a very bad opinion of Churchill. I have expressed that he was a racist, he was narrow-minded, and he did a lot of terrible things to India, including causing famine on a large scale. But the reality is that he resisted pressure to concede to Hitler. At a time, if you remember, in the 1940s, up to the invasion of the Soviet Union in June, and subsequently the attack on Pearl Harbor by Japan, which brought America into the war, Britain was alone, facing a very strong Germany that had taken over so much of Western Europe. And he said, no, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to continue to fight. And he had that indomitable fighting spirit. So we may not like Churchill, but we have to learn from his fighting spirit. In India, we said, all right, we are peaceful people. You want to secede from us? You are welcome to secede. I mean, many of Lincoln's associates felt the same way. If they had been presidents of the United States instead of Lincoln, most likely you would have had 2 United States, or maybe 3 or 4. Maybe the process would have gone on. And you would never have had a superpower United States of America. You would never have had a superpower China, but for Mao, and thereafter Deng Xiaoping. Now, Mahesh, the truth is, as I said, frankly, I have dealt with, as you said, a lot of people in government. The less you know me, the more you claim to be an expert on me if you're in government, and the more you give out false reports about me to people who know even less about me, frankly. That has been my experience. But those who know me well, I maintain those relationships. Many of them are relationships that neither they or I ever talk about. I remember in the old days of the Indo-US nuclear deal. I used to be briefed by people. They would come by some 6 o'clock flight to where I was. Sometimes this city, sometimes that. They would leave. They would go for their meetings. It would be about 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock. So they'd have 3 or 4 hours to brief me, and then they would go for their meeting, and they'd pretend that they took a shower or something at the hotel. Actually, they went straight to the meeting. I was given a briefing. Now, till today, I've written a lot of pieces in Organizer. Organizer was one of the few publications to carry my articles during those days when Sonia Gandhi inspired fear in the country. And I must say some of those days included many days where Mr. Vajpayee was the prime minister, I'm sorry to say. But in any case, and in Organizer, I wrote with such, if I may say so, knowledge of atomic science. I used to get letters from physics students, please give us the answer to the problem, to this nuclear problem. And let me assure you, I know as much of physics, frankly, as the person in this audience, next person in this audience, who knows a little more than me, but really nobody in this audience knows as little physics, as little nuclear physics as I do. But please read my articles on the bomb in Organizer. You're not going to understand that. Why? Because I believe in briefings. I believe in keeping relationships private. And that is why I write about North Korea. I write about China. I write about Iran. I write about the United States. And I write about Taiwan. And I write, Taiwan is a little exceptional because in Taiwan, I think I am a little more open about my contacts. They started a long time ago when Narasimha Rao was the prime minister. He was a proud son of Andhra, and I regard Narasimha Rao with great reverence. With great reverence. I knew him, my family knew him. In fact, when I was a student, he used to come and stay in my hostel room because he had nowhere to stay. He was then the general secretary of the Ramana Maharshi Society. His basically, he was Mr. Narasimha Rao's title was General Secretary, Ramana Maharshi Society. At least that was the letterhead they used to write when scrawling letters to me. I mean, I admired that man. He did so much for India. And that's why I'm glad that recently my 2004 interview of him on what happened during Ram Janambhoomi episode came out, because it shows he tried his level best. It didn't work because of sabotage. But anyway, what I want to say, when Deng Xiaoping started his Odyssey, we were a bigger economy than China's. Today, they're nearly 6 times our size. We must reflect, frankly, on not only what the Chinese did right, which we seldom do, but on what we did wrong, which we even more seldom do. You understand, Girdhar? And when I reflect on these things, it depends on whether you're reading one op-ed of mine or the other. I'm accused of being a spy for China. I'm accused of being a spy for the United States, for Pakistan, for this or for that. I'm very happy, like I said, the people who are supposed to be writing such great reports about me know nothing about me. Many of them have never met me, and I don't care. But if those who know me for a long time, who know me well, and they are there in this world, I don't believe any of them will believe this nonsense. And for me, that core of people who know me well is enough. And frankly, that core is rising because of my articles, because of my writings. So I'm happy to see that core expand, that core of people who know, who can sift out from the fake news and inspired fake news. Because I agree with you, there is something about Delhi which poisons governance in India. And as you and I discussed, frankly, Girdhar, whether it's the Mughals, whether it is from Agra to Delhi, whether it is the British from Calcutta to Delhi, whether it is the independence government which immediately set up its offices in the buildings that the British left. I mean, the British, frankly, had not even removed the utensils from the kitchen when they started getting occupied by people who swore by Gandhian simplicity. I never believed Gandhi believed that you should stay in palaces. I mean, frankly, I haven't read that particular thing about Gandhiji's works, and I don't believe I ever will, because he never wrote it. But there is something about Delhi, frankly, which affects the thinking. And in what way it affects the thinking. Now, I'm not casting any kind of this thing, because I know several politicians. Many of them are, let me admit, sources of mine, and they are friends of mine, and they're all individually very good people. But there is a problem in Delhi, and that problem is in the Lutyens zone, you have a lens which views the rest of India in much the same way as earlier incarnations did. Essentially, people who are not really adult, who cannot be trusted with information, who cannot be trusted with responsibility. And when P.V. Narasimha Rao decided, and let me tell you, the real reformer was Narasimha Rao, because as industry minister, he did 10 times more reforms than Manmohan Singh ever did as finance minister. He ensured an open door for the foreigner. He never did very much for Indian industry or the Indian taxpayer. He did a lot for the foreigner, and the foreigner started praising him, and lo and behold, all of us also started praising him. Narasimha Rao completely, demolished the industrial licensing system as industry minister. And this was an amazing contribution that he made, which I think really unbound Prometheus, so to speak. But what I'm trying to say is that, something in Delhi which makes the people feel that who are sitting in Delhi in temporary positions, we are special people. And, the point is, I'm sure, you and I have, by the grace of God, we have avoided high office. I have avoided government office all my life. Either I have run away from it or it has run away from me, whatever it is, I have avoided it. And I think I'm happy that I have avoided it, because, my thinking has evolved. And because I find, that, and my friends tell me who have high office, the minute they become ministers, the same people who used to frequent the previous ministers' houses come to their houses with very important messages, very good advice, nice things for the missus. You know, they're the most helpful people on earth, the most friendly, the most wonderful, the most charming. The civil servants who were hand in glove with making money. For example, Chidambaram has a huge flock of civil servants who are all complicit in his activities. And almost all of them have been comfortably accommodated after 2014. Almost all of them. And many of them, in fact, have been given promotion after promotion. Why? Because they will come to their new masters. And then, you know, the new masters will feel in a very short time that they are such wonderful people. And the people like, you know, I don't know whether it is you or me or whoever, who are basically suspicious of them for what they did in the past. After all, somebody who helped Chidambaram, you know, when he was in the revenue department in Chennai to get land, and his wife to get land, and his son to get land, and then subsequently as finance minister, and then subsequently after, you know, the government fell, going after people whom Chidambaram wanted to be dealt with. I mean, but these are such wonderful people. They are such lovely people. They are such loyal people. So people like us must be rascals. We must be either idiots, which is a benign interpretation, or rascals. And then you have people coming with reports. And I can tell you in India, you know, 2 + 2 is equal to 4. You know what is simpler? Creating a fake dossier about someone if that someone doesn't know a thing about that dossier and the sources from which it is put. You can talk to 20 sources who claim to have known, you know, known you over since you were a little child. And they will say you were like this, you were like that. And you have not met any of them. But you will never be shown that dossier. So you're unable to defend yourself. And as I said, I mean, some of these dossiers are not unknown to some of us. And it's a bit, you know, it's a bit disgusting, if I may say so, to see that writing fake dossiers about people who are a threat to their monopoly of access is such a common, activity in the Lutyens zone in Delhi. So I just want to say that I agree with you about Delhi. I agree, but I don't know if it is Delhi. I don't know if, you know, personally, I don't think it is just, it is Delhi. I think it is something about the mindset and something about the, you know, whatever, I don't know. Maybe our politicians are insecure. Maybe they come from backgrounds where automatically they believe, for example, only an IPS officer knows security, knows about security. Only an IAS officer knows about domestic policy. Only an IFS officer knows about foreign policy. And we have many outstanding IFS, IPS and IAS officers. But we have a few outstanding people who have never been IAS, IPS and you know, IFS also. In America, in China, the two existing superpowers, there is extensive interlinkage of thinking, and there is extensive movement back and forth between think tanks, between universities, between companies and the administration at all levels. Donald Trump came to power. He brought in generals and CEOs because Donald Trump is a man who says, if I give some instruction, it should be followed. And then, of course, he was completely derailed by the Russia investigation, which I agree, it was a hoax. And after that, poor Donald Trump is no longer Donald Trump. Positions he's held for 40 years, for example, on Wahhabism, he's completely abandoned. So the man has been shaken by what has happened to him. And I think anybody would be shaken at the kind of that has been mounted on him, and which will be mounted on him if he doesn't come to power once again. But all I want to say, it was not an accident that China is where it is today. It's not an accident that Chairman Mao was able to not only unify large parts of China, or if I may say so, unify is not the right word because many of those parts, frankly, were hardly ever in China, except maybe very notionally. Certainly not, you know, in my view, several of the parts that they claim to be in their territory, and which are now controlled by them. But he did it. And that China was a stable entity. Societally, the Chinese people were united in one way. Many of them were united by their hatred of Mao. Many of them were united in their hatred of Mao's enemies, but they all started getting an identity as Chinese, which they never had in the past. So the possibility of a future civil war was very largely obviated in a country which has seen civil wars and warlordism and breakaway provinces and breakaways for a big chunks of its history. That's what Mao did. What Deng did was to modernize China. And I can tell you that after Deng, you have Jiang Zemin, of course, who frankly was not much to write about, but then you have Hu Jintao, and from Hu Jintao's period, he started developing indigenous Chinese technology. Xi Jinping has carried that to a different level. In my view, I rank 3 leaders who are transformational, 2 who have already achieved the transformation, Mao and Deng, and 1 leader who's trying to achieve the transformation, which is Xi Jinping. It's a work in progress. Whether he succeeds or not, we do not know. But he's the 3rd transformational leader in China. So what I want to say is, Giridhar, it's not an accident. You take the example of climbing a mountain by, let's say, a goat. Since I'm a, I was born under the star of Capricorn. Let's say that, although I'm a vegetarian, let me say that I have a fondness for goats because I'm a Capricornian. What does a goat do? The goat climbs a mountain. How does the goat climb a mountain? I mean, even an experienced mountaineer finds it difficult to climb the mountain that a goat climbs. It's a tiny little animal with tiny little hooves. It locates opportunities in the mountain. It locates ledges. It locates stones. It locates perches. And it uses every opportunity, big or small, to go higher and higher and higher and higher up the mountain until finally the goat reaches the grass or wherever it is, maybe at the summit, maybe at a plateau somewhere in between, which it's really looking for in that climb. Every opportunity is seized by the goat. And may I say that that is what Deng Xiaoping did. Every little opportunity globally was used by him. Mao used every opportunity internally, first, of course, by force, in a sense, bringing China together, and then internally using every opportunity to basically forcibly unite the country. And he very modestly said to Kissinger, when Kissinger said, "You have changed Mao." Well, I may have changed a few things in the vicinity of Beijing. What he didn't mention to Kissinger, all the boundaries of China were in fact completely tightly controlled by the vicinity of Beijing in one way or the other. So what Mao was telling Kissinger in language I'm not sure Kissinger understood, because the Chinese use very subtle language, that look, I control this country, yes, completely, as much as I control Beijing. And when you talk of subtlety, for example, I'll give you another example. Way back in the 1950s, 2 or 3 times when American visitors used to come and meet him. And remember, Mao is an individual who is a guerrilla leader, launched a campaign to win the hearts of the Americans. You look at the Americans who were involved in the Second World War, they all went to Mao, and most of them preferred Mao to Chiang Kai-shek. Americans started helping Mao, including over Chiang Kai-shek. He was a communist. I don't think he had any love for the Americans at all, but he was able to charm the Americans and charm them into believing that he could be their friend. And the Americans were so charmed that they gave him a lot of assistance. And I can tell you that assistance was critical, including in the fight against Chiang Kai-shek. And the very bad opinion which was carried back of Chiang Kai-shek by many Americans who met him played a role in the minimal help that the Americans gave Chiang Kai-shek when Mao finally went after him. And Mao got the peasants, the workers, much of the Chinese population on his side by saying that, like Lenin, land to the peasants, land to the workers. But most importantly, let's end this war. By the time Lenin came back, I'm very certain with the help of the Germans, I'm very certain he was given money by Germany, and he came back, and I'm sure there was an agreement which Lenin believed in. I don't think he kept that agreement. If he didn't believe in it, he would have torn it up as soon as he reached. He was also an opportunist in a major way. But he came back, and he stopped a war which had already been stopped by millions of Russian troops deserting the front. If the war had been stopped 2 years earlier, you'd probably still have a nominal Tsar as the emperor of Russia. You didn't have it because, and Kerensky, the minute he said we will continue the war, finished. Lenin, the only person who said we will stop the war and stop it now, he got power. It's not accidental. So this is what I'm saying. Russia was a superpower at one time. The Soviet Union was a superpower. Russia is not a superpower. But any power becomes a superpower, whether it's the Roman Empire, or whether it is frankly some of the great powers in India, whether it is some of the great kingdoms of North India, or the great in past eras, whether it is some of the great kingdoms of South India, which went all over Southeast Asia, and where their culture and influence is still very strong. It is because I'm very certain those who were in command knew how to take advantage of opportunities. See, Giridhar, I'm basically kind of, talking to our friends essentially, because I am a person who believes in reflection. And if you look at that, for example, Churchill, you check what happened. How did Britain win the war? Did Britain win the war because of its RAF, as you see in the history books? Did Britain win the war because the Americans say we pumped large amounts of oil? No. Britain won the war because it was able to crack the German Enigma code. And thereafter, the British took a decision to keep the Enigma code secret from its own army and from its own bureaucracy and from its own political class, and to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of British soldiers in order to ensure that the Germans never knew that they had cracked the code and they would change the code of their machines. Who cracked that code? The code was cracked by an individual called Alan Turing. Alan Turing was a German Jew. And I want to again say that I believed long before, and I still believe that the Jewish community is among the most brilliant community in the world. And per capita, the Jews have done more for humanity than any other community on earth. That's why when Hitler, killed about 40% of them, he has done a terrible disservice to humanity. But having said that, I want to say, Alan Turing was not very popular. He was clearly an outsider to the cozy world of the British upper class, the world which included so many Soviet agents, the world which included so many Colonel Blimps who believed in the Indian Empire, in the British Empire, like Churchill. But this guy was very different. He was rude, he was rough, he was arrogant, he spoke his mind, and people hated him. So when there was a cryptographic group formed, and his own teammates said, this guy is awful, we're not going to work with him, then what happened? The team manager, who was a naval commander, said, okay, I'm sorry, Dr. Turing, you're out. You'll have to be sent out. You can't stay here. Well, Turing, guess what happened? Winston Churchill, he sent a long handwritten letter to Winston Churchill. A British official. I don't know if any official in Lieutenant Delhi would ever do such a thing. I doubt it. But a British official, who had talked to Turing once or twice and thought this guy had some brains, he said, okay, Alan, I'll deliver your letter straight to the Prime Minister. Winston Churchill, normally a Prime Minister would, some mad scientist is writing to me. He would have given it to some secretary or secretary who would have thought it's all gobbledygook, either filed it or destroyed it. Winston Churchill read it, line by line by line. He sat for about 3-4 hours and discussed it with some other people, not the name, but the ideas. He gave a command to Bletchley Park, the cryptographers. The cryptographers were working in a very nice British mansion in the middle of nowhere called Bletchley Park. I want Alan Turing reinstated at once. This has to be done this day. I want action this day. So what happened? this thing came to this naval commander, he had to call Turing back. So Turing thought he was going to be, abused again. He refused to come. They took him there and he said, well, Dr. Turing, you're back and you are heading this mission. So he said, thank you, sir, for changing your mind. He said, I have not changed my mind. Winston Churchill, the prime minister, has ordered that this should be done. I don't agree with that order, but I'm doing it. Look, that order is what ensured the development of the modern computer, and before that, the cracking of Enigma. So all the German coded messages during the war were intercepted and they were released. And some of them were shared with the Soviet Union, some of them were shared with the Americans, many of them were completely not acted upon because the British were afraid if they act upon too many, the Germans will get suspicious that their code had been broken. So many of them, the majority were not acted upon. But enough was acted upon to ensure that the big wars of that period, basically the Normandy invasion, Stalingrad, other such major massive Kursk, all these campaigns that turned out to be disasters for the Germans, they were disasters because of Enigma. They were disasters because of that. And they were disasters because Winston Churchill trusted this quote unquote mad scientist, this Jewish German, whom all his British colleagues hated and whom the entire bureaucracy disliked and whom they wanted to sack. And ultimately the poor man was basically sentenced after the war because it was secret. Nobody knew what he had done during the war. So he was sentenced because he was, he had tendencies which are not regarded as acceptable under British law, which fortunately our Supreme Court has found out to be completely legal. I'm glad about that. But Alan Turing was sentenced and he was subject to chemical treatment, and he was so completely disconsolate that he killed himself in 2 years of this horrible chemical treatment. The reward that he got from the British establishment for saving them was that they killed him by chemical castration. So, anyway, that's a separate story, but I think you should all read that story, especially Churchill's decision to make him the head of the institution and to give extra funding to him, because that is what created the computer and which won the Allies the war. So what I'm trying to tell you, opportunities come in unexpected places. If you look only in the expected places for opportunities, for personnel, for policies, for ideas, for alternatives, well, you're not going to get an Alan Turing, and you're not going to win the war. I'm sorry to say, against a ruthless, determined enemy. And both our geopolitical rivals and our economic foes, frankly, our economic enemies are, if I may say so, very, very ruthless geopolitical rivals. Our economic situation is ruthless. If you look at it as a rival, it is ruthless. It demands clear-sighted thinking. It demands clear-sighted, sometimes thinking which is, sneeringly called out of the box, conspiracy theory related. Any theory does not fit the theories which have been given in the files, of course, it's a conspiracy theory. I'm sorry to say that I've studied the way many files get constructed, and there are a lot of conspiracies behind those files, a lot of them involving Swiss banks. I don't want to say anything more about that. So what I want to say, what I'd like to say at this point, I'd like to now ask for a few questions before we go on to a second stage of my discussion. I want to open the floor to what I'm saying. But you understand what I mean? There have to be preconditions for being a superpower. I said in 1990s, India is going to be a superpower. For the last some years, about 10 years, I've been saying, we may be a superpower. No longer that we will be a superpower, we may be a superpower. And I don't want to reach the stage in which I'm going to say we won't be a superpower. I would hate to reach that stage. But, if we can avoid that, it means doing what the other superpowers have done. Doing what, for example, the British did to win the war against an enemy when they were alone. And of course, Enigma was cracked finally when the British situation was much better. But the reality is that that is what won Britain the war. The Civil War, which Lincoln fought, a man of peace, and he fought the war. He fought for the Emancipation Proclamation. And from my, in Kerala, I'm happy to say when I was a young man and, something of associated with a big paper as a director, I made sure that the effort by a section of the community to say we must open the priesthood to people who are trained in Vedic law, trained in the mantras. Anybody who's trained in Vedic law, anybody who's trained in the mantra, irrespective of birth, should be declared able to function as a priest. This entire business of being an expert from birth is, in my view, very hard to justify on a scientific basis. In the same way, I would like to say I believe in what I call, and what my friend Kanshiram used to call the vertical view, the horizontal view of society. He used to pick a pen and show it to me and say, look, I believe like this. And Kanshiram, in the days before he was, he became very successful and well off, and many of the people who basically were introduced to him through, they were my friends, and because they used to come and meet me at home, they were Kanshiram's friends also. What he meant was, we are all equal people. We are all horizontal. We may be different, but we are equal. And if you look upon the society as vertical, then you are making a mistake. And so when I authored something for Bharat University in terms of the educational program, asking for a horizontal view of society. Because if you look at textbooks across the world, in Europe, for example, in America, they're all triumphalist textbooks. We are superior. What is the difference between Hitler saying we are the master race and the Europeans saying, oh, we are superior, and the European Union, which is essentially a club which says only if you're European, you count. If you're not European, you don't count. Or of course, if you're European race, you count. So the fact is that, there's a certain view of society which is needed for us to be a superpower. I have some very interesting theories about why, for example, our Rajput princes lost the wars against an enemy that was so much weaker and less capable than they were. And one of the reasons one of the hypotheses that I've come up with is that the bulk of the population was not able to fight in the army. They were regarded as unable to fight. They were regarded as not martial enough to be soldiers. So possibly the overwhelming bulk of the population was not able to fight. And so the armies that fought were not enough. I know, for example, I've studied the war between the Greeks and the Persians. The Persian army was a slave army. There was no incentive for the slave conscripts to fight. They will only exchange one master for another. They'll exchange the master in Persia for the master in Greece. But the Greeks, the Romans, they felt they're free people. They have their independence. They have their freedom. They can do what they like. And they fought. They fought like tigers. And they won. So I'm only saying, possibly, something of a horizontal approach to society, even to the military, even to the governance, and supposedly what do I say? A vertical view, a horizontal view could have been helpful in ensuring that our country did not suffer from the success of those invaders, because frankly, in every way possible, we were far ahead of the rest of the world. We were not united. That's very true. That's a lesson we need to learn. But we were also having societal issues, which again, we need to look very carefully about. We need to read Valmiki's Ramayana. Who was Valmiki? Where did he come from? Who was Lord Krishna? The God Krishna, whom we all, frankly, completely adore, and with reason. Who was he? And where did he come from? And what kind of a society? So I would like to say, if you want to be a superpower, there is, in my view, certain societal, imperatives. There is, in my view, certain governance imperatives. And one of them is to fulfill Narendra Modi's dictum of minimum government and maximum governance. I want to say, I've studied long and hard in great detail why the only people who took over the British were the Romans. I mean, the Franks and all that came here and there, they got absorbed. The Romans, why? It couldn't be done by Hitler, it couldn't be done by anybody else. Because right from the time of the Magna Carta, the British monarchs had very limited power over the people. If the people wanted to invent something, if the people wanted to set up a business, if the people wanted to run something, they had freedom. They didn't have to go to some, British Babu or the other. Oh, sir, do we have permission to do this? Do we have permission to go to Virginia and plant tobacco? Do you have permission to go to the West Indies? And Francis Drake, I mean, do I have permission, Madam, Queen Elizabeth, to destroy the Spanish ships and seize their treasure? He didn't get any permission. In fact, Queen Elizabeth said this thing should not be done by British. He ignored her because he knew when he came back, he was a British man and they would not harm. What happened in India? In India, British people who stole from the British were severely punished. If you stole from the Indians, you were rewarded. I mean, stealing from the Indians was not stealing. Stealing from the native Indians of America was not stealing. Stealing from the colonies was not stealing. You understand? The definition of stealing was different. So again, I'm saying very frankly, mindsets have to be, and when you're looking at the roots of India, if you go back to Valmiki, if you go back to Lord Krishna, if you go back to the lessons of the past, and if you go back to the histories of the past, and my wife recently wrote a piece in Sunday Guardian, a poem on the mother. And for all of us, I think for me at least, when I think of the mother, I mean, I'm not saying my mother, the mother, there's only one mother for me. And she wrote a poem on the mother. And I can only say that, reflect on that. Reflect on that. Reflect on, frankly, if I may say so, the accepted diet in those periods. I'm not saying that diet is good. I'm saying that environment means we should all be vegetarian. But I would also not say that it should be the police or law or regulation or the stick or the danda that will enforce that diet. It has to be social change, conscientization, working among the people and convincing them. In my case, I was convinced by my father's mother who thought, her beloved husband, C.V. Subramania Iyer, she thought of him as the apple of her eye. And she said, this young grandson of mine should be exactly like C.V. Subramania Iyer. But I don't think I was exactly like him or like anybody else. But she insisted. And I remember from my very young days, her screaming at my grandfather on my mother's side, who would try and give me some eggs or fish or something that will improve my physique or what. I was a pretty sickly child, screaming at them, And I remember my grandmother's screams, and I thought, I'm never going to betray my grandmother. And I can tell you, except accidentally when I've chewed on some, ham sandwich or something in Paris or something by mistake. And again, I think it happened to me, in New York by mistake. I thought, prosciutto was a cheese. I took one bite and then it didn't feel like cheese. And it was not cheese. So I'm sorry. Barring that, I've been a vegetarian. But look, I don't believe in coercion. And I can tell you from my experience of lockup during emergency, and I would not like to say I was a victim of Sanjay Gandhi or of Indira Gandhi. Indira Gandhi knew my mother very well. I knew her. Sanjay Gandhi knew me. I knew him. And may I say that when I suddenly got, in a sense, freedom, and I had to report back or something for some stupid, reporting back everything, I came straight to Delhi and I met him and I basically screamed at him. And all this I wrote when Sanjay died in 1980 in Malayalam in Mathrubhumi. It's all there. I've spoken about this, I've said about this, but it's like, it's so personal. I have seldom written about it. I'm telling you this openly now. I sent a request to him on the phone that, look, I'm so-and-so, I want to meet him. I had 3 days to go back and report to the police back in where I was held from. It's such a horrible memory. I don't even want to think of that particular place. I just want to, remove it from my mind. But what I'm saying, And, people, I mean, in about half an hour, I got a call back, to come the next afternoon. So, I mean, frankly, I mean, my father was surprised because Sanjay Gandhi at that point in time was the all in all. He was seen as more powerful than Indira Gandhi. I'm sure a lot of people wanted to meet him. I went straight to Delhi, and a little before that particular time, I went in, and he was in his bedroom, and I didn't wait. They said, so and so, yes, yes. They escorted me to the study, and I was the only person who was escorted to study. I was a nobody, frankly, an absolute nobody in that period. Very young, a nobody, barely out of my teens, if I may say so, and an absolute nobody, frankly, and to the all-powerful Sanjay Gandhi. And then somebody said, Saab to bedroom mein hai. I rushed into his bedroom, and the guy was, sitting on his bed. I said, hey, cool down, what's happened to you? So I just told him, what are you doing? What are you doing to us? My mother had written some pamphlet about the emergency or something, and she also landed into a lot of trouble. And again, that's sort of, anyway, whatever it is. Again, as I said, I don't believe she wrote it. I mean, she wrote something. I wrote against the Maruti project in Nikhil Chakravarti's magazine, Mainstream. I don't think I wrote it because I thought Maruti was a bad project for the Prime Minister's son. Not that it was a bad project. My mother said to me, because my mother didn't think this kind of curve was good. She was a poet. She wrote, she felt, she decided, and she did exactly what she wanted to do to the very end of her life. So she wrote that thing. So I said, you have gone and hounded my mother, hounded me, and my father. My father was, the chief officer in charge of rural credit. Now he's been put as chief officer in charge of drivers, sweeps, and cleaners. Preparatory to leaving the Reserve Bank of India. What kind of oppression are you indulging in? So he said, he didn't say anything. That is Sanjay. He hardly talked. He picked up the phone. He called B.C. Shukla. He called Om Mehta. He gave them details of my mother. He gave them details of mine. He didn't give details of his father. Maybe he forgot. I don't know. Anyway, nothing really. And since my father was still chief officer, no details were given. But he called the two of them. I don't know what he said, but he said a lot in Hindi, and he said it in pretty nasty language. He spoke in, that was Sanjay. He was, when he was upset, he was upset. Then he just looked at me and said, okay, fine, that's it. And he just left the room. And I don't know what was going on. I came back to Delhi. I came back to where I was. And of course, I went to the police station, and I said, here I am, and I'm supposed to report. So they looked at me and what is your name and everything, and I gave the name. So I said, I know nothing like this. So, I couldn't understand the beginning, but finally, because I was in a slightly agitated state of mind, I didn't want to go to a particular place. But they said, sir, nothing like this. Then they called the commissioner, and the commissioner sent a deputy commissioner or somebody else, and they said, what are you talking about, sir? Sir, he said, not at all. There's nothing at all. I'm so sorry. There's a big mistake. He said, what mistake? I said, this kind of thing has happened to me. No, sir, I don't know what has happened to you, but there's nothing about you, sir. And if you don't mind, I have a beautiful, I have a Jeep. I'll arrange for a car, and you can be taken to wherever you're staying. So in a somewhat confused state, with my record completely cleaned, I went back in a nice police car, a plainclothes police car, by the way. It was not openly a police car, so thank God I wasn't looked upon with suspicion by the, by the people I was staying with. But I was sent back there. So can I call myself victim of Sanjay Gandhi? No. Sanjay Gandhi helped me, frankly. Can my mother call herself victim of Indira Gandhi? No. Indira Gandhi never knew what happened to her, as they never knew what happened. That's what I'm saying. It's important for leaders to know what the hell is happening on the ground and what the power given to their minions, what the minions are doing on the ground. It's very important to know. And I can tell you this from practical experience, based on the fact that neither Sanjay Gandhi nor his mother had any inkling of what is happening to Kamala Das or to this idiotic guy. I used to be called a different name in those things. Most people call me by my nickname, not Madhav Nalapat, but let's say Nalapat. He didn't know at all. As to my father, what happened? he was a victim. As soon as Bharati Desai came to power, one of the first orders was H.M. Patel as finance minister, promoting him as executive director of the Reserve Bank of India. One of the first orders passed by the new finance minister, H.M. Patel. They remembered those who suffered. They remembered those who stood with them one way or the other. They did not embrace those who were against them and who suddenly have become their biggest and most ardent admirers. And as far as my father is concerned, one of the first orders that H.M. Patel did, and I would like to say I never met H.M. Patel in my life. I don't remember if I met him. I don't think so. I met Moraji by some time, because my grandfather used to know him very well. And he used to take me along when I used to meet him. And even Moraji Bhai as Prime Minister, I used to meet him. I met him when he was not Prime Minister. I've traveled with him when, before he was arrested in the emergency. I didn't think much of him as a minister because of his gold control order and his very statist way of controlling. But as a human being, he was an interesting and good human being. But what I want to say is very, very simple. Moraji, it must have been Moraji. Because why would the finance minister intervene in a small matter like the executive directorship of the Reserve Bank? Moraji ensured that my father was given a promotion almost as soon as he took charge in his office. So I just want to say, Giridhar, there are some mindsets, there are some courses of action, there are some, if I may say so, there are some tracks, societal tracks that need to be followed if we want to be a superpower. And I think it's very important that we, you, I, everybody else, we try and ensure that these tracks and mindsets are followed, because all of us would like to see this country become a superpower. So having said that, I'd like to close this particular phase of my discussion and open the floor. I'm sorry I'm being rambling a little bit. I'm talking, I regard you as my friends. Frankly, the younger you are to me, in my view, the closer, oddly enough, many people are to my way of thinking. And I don't know if that is true with your group, but I'd like to say, I want to see my country as a superpower. I'd like to see it during my lifetime. And my lifetime is not going to be indefinite. In fact, at my age, every day is a bonus, so to speak. It's reaching or probably past the average life expectancy of this country. I'd really love to see that during my lifetime. It's still possible, but just barely possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Nalapat ji. I think it was nice to see that you went into a memory, background and narrated many things which you haven't narrated till now. I'm sure you didn't speak about your emergency days, and you didn't speak about so many things ever. I haven't at least ever heard you talking in detail matters related to those closed chapters in your life. It was definitely a walk through memory lane. It was very good. But what is ailing us? I know there's a mindset is something which is, we have been living with this for decades now, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. But then it is a leadership which has to bring in certain changes. I'm sure the Chinese mindset also was not probably tuned, and the leadership like Deng Xiaoping or somebody nudged or pushed them or forced them into whatever they are today. Where do you think our leadership has failed us?
See,
yes, there are streaks of success like P.V. Narasimha Rao and here and there, but then civilizationally, why are we like this? Why are we not thinking ourselves to be a very powerful civilization? We still have that sense of inferiority complex or subservience or whatever you might call that. Do you think the leadership failed, or do you think what has gone wrong here?
I wouldn't like to say the leadership has failed, because the current leadership is led by a person who has, basically been very unique in terms of his family, for example. and ensuring that his family did not get, did not pick up the usual benefits that are there in political families at all, who came from the people, who has come from a very humble background, and who has, gone through the hard school of life. So I am still hopeful about the leadership as expressed in the Prime Minister. And as to what is going wrong, I would say, Giridhar, I have written a lot about this, and I would not like to repeat what I've written. I would only like to point out my view about the opportunities that we have. And in my opinion, let me go back to China, because China was the last superpower. The Chinese learned from the United States and from Britain. Let me say that the Zhou Enlai commissioned an exhaustive study of great empires. Greece, Rome, some Indian empires, and their rise and their fall. And he drew certain lessons from that. And many of those lessons were shared with Deng Xiaoping, because Deng Xiaoping and Zhou were quite close. In fact, Zhou managed to ensure Deng Xiaoping remained alive during the days when very few people who were, what do I say, not in the good books of Chairman Mao, many of them seem to have very short life expectancy. So there have been lessons to be learned. Now, let us, let me only say that Zhou Enlai said to Kissinger. Kissinger wanted a very flowery statement to come out. I love you, you love me, I hug you, you hug me. Nixon loves Mao, Mao loves Nixon. Let's go back to the old period in which Americans and Chinese loved each other. Then what I think what Mao said. If I remember, it was Mao. He said, "We have been throwing buckets of filth on each other's head. We have been throwing buckets of filth for so many years at each other's head, and all of a sudden you say that this is perfume." That we have been throwing perfume at each other? Are our people fools? No. We will do a matter-of-fact thing that in your interest and in my interest, we are coming to this agreement. In other words, Giridhar, forget your personal likes and dislikes, including the higher you are, choosing the people around you. If you choose people around you based on whom you like and keep people away from you based on whom you dislike, it is very unlikely that you are going to be successful in the task that you set out to do. So what Mao said, I don't know, Mao certainly didn't like anybody. So the people he kept around him were either nobody was there whom he liked. It depends on the degree of dislike. But the reality is, the point he made was, look upon everything with the cold eye of opportunity. And as I say, we are children of Sanatana Dharma. We are children of that life force that is celebrated, in our thinking, that universal life force. All of us are children, irrespective of what label we go by. And I'm so proud to have been born in a family with a tradition which I think has at least can go back a very large length of time, although I must say the Chittanjur royal family, which I believe was the first royal family of Kerala, it had the misfortune of fighting the British. And unfortunately, Chittanjur was no match for the British Empire. So the kingdom was destroyed, and the main temple has fortunately become the main grounds where the temple elephants of Guruvayur are kept. I think that's a very wonderful thing, and I think it's a great thing that the main palace is now where the elephants of Guruvayur are kept, of the Chittanjur family. I'm proud to say that I mean, to some small extent, that thing, but I don't believe that these things matter. I frankly don't think these things matter, but they were an interesting point of Indian life. And if I may say so, you're talking of Mao's cultural revolution. Nehru and Indira Gandhi imposed a much more severe cultural revolution on India, both of them. And the entire culture was completely transformed. And it has taken a long while to get that culture back. In the case of China also, the war and the warlordism, and Mao, let's be honest, Mao had utter contempt for Chinese culture. Mao didn't like Chinese culture at all. He had utter contempt for it. He used to smash the olds, was his theory. So he was certainly no friend of culture. Only after Hong Kong handover, the Chinese started coming back to their culture. And today, that culture is celebrated in China. They're spending billions of dollars on buying back artifacts, on recreating their old culture, trying to make Chinese people proud of all the 5,000 years instead of all the 99 years, soon to be 100 years of the Communist Party of China. But, having said that, I want to say that what I'm saying is in that spirit. Many times there's been looked at from the spirit of Kissinger, well, let's forget the past and let's do something else. And let's, what do I say? Let's remember the past and let's be angry. Let's remember the past and let's be joyful. Look, the past is the past. Thank you for the past. I personally believe that a good ruler will richly reward anybody who has done past service and also protect in the present and look after the future, but will not necessarily consult or give authority for past deeds. There'll be a rich reward, and in India you could call the governorship the similar kind of reward. You could call, helping somebody set up children to set up a business would be that kind of reward. I see no problem in that. Frankly, many of what we call corruption in India is not defined as corruption anywhere else in the world. And that is why we have so many, acts of corruption in India and so little in America and Europe and Switzerland, where most of what we call corruption is not corruption at all, frankly. So it's just the definition of corruption and the kind of regulations we have. Almost anything you do can be regarded as an act of corruption or the breach of the regulations. So I simply want to say that what I want to say now is essentially, if I may say so, based on that kind of thinking. You mind if I drink some water? I think it's
please. So
please go ahead.
Yeah. So now let's come back to the current situation that is around us, right? The issue of what's happening in Afghanistan. US is having withdrawal pangs. It's not sure whether it wants to withdraw, whether it wants to stay. They want to leave it to Taliban. They're unable to decide. It's Khalilzad will say something, and then next day Trump will revert it. I'm looking at the Akhand Bharat canvas, countries around us. So that is a serious cause of concern for us. I know that I heard your topic when you spoke in Manipal. You spoke that India would need Iran on its side, whereas we are not buying oil from them. And then, Chabahar is still not fully operational. And then US is trying to withdraw. So that was on the topic of how do we take back areas occupied by Pakistan. You had said that we need to open a war front from the Afghanistan side as well. So Afghanistan is likely to, again, get away from Indian hand as we look at it. China has already stationed quite a significant amount of PLA soldiers in POJK and Gilgit-Baltistan. And this aggression on Golden, Bay Goldie or Pongong So or even in Sikkim, across the border, they're trying to create certain disturbances. And Nepal is more or less slipped out of our hands. So given this kind,
yes,
I really see that Bharat can really play an Akhand role around. Modi went there twice to Nepal, still it has slipped out of your hand. And we have done enough for Afghanistan, yet Afghanistan is slipping from our hand. Probably we retrieved a small country like Maldives, but Sri Lanka is still on an edge. We're not sure whether they're with us or against us. One day they're with us, second day they're against. So around the area war we used to originally call as Akhand Bharat, our role doesn't seem to be Akhand. It seems to be shrinking. So is it the fact, what do we need to do really to get back that primacy of this entire place?
You see, Giridhar, I want to say that for us, we have to look at Akhand Bharat as the whole world. Long back in the 1990s, when I was in Germany, I was asked to give a talk on geopolitics. Before I became the country's first professor of geopolitics in Manipal University, Professor Vice Chancellor Valyathan and Ramdas Pai invited me, and I joined. I gave the sketch of an eagle. And you know, in Germany, the eagle has been a very powerful bird. And one wing reaching out into West Asia, the Middle East, etc. One wing reaching out into Southeast Asia, and the talons reaching out into the Indian Ocean, and the head reaching out beyond, you know, into Central Asia, etc., etc. And I said, this is the natural habitat of India. Please don't think it is only what you call South Asia. When I used to give lectures in Georgia University, I was made a distinguished fellow of their department. I used to say that I used to dislike the word South Asia. I said, there's India. And the only country which you're talking about South Asia, which has got a border with any other country in so-called South Asia, is India. So what are we talking about South Asia? We're at best talking about India and its neighbors, but I would not like to say that, because I said, I believe in a horizontal view of geopolitics. So India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, I mean, XXX, you name it. That's what I said. So I don't like to even use the word South Asia. So to me, our potential, we will not be a superpower unless our Akhand Bharat is that the wings of that eagle stretch across the entire globe. So those wings in the early 90s are different because of the enterprise of the Indian people from the wings of today. And even though our GDP is nothing much to write home about in terms of dollars, because of the policy of the Reserve Bank and the Finance Ministry of battering down the value of the rupee consistently, the reality is that that is where the wings have got to reach. Today, Giridhar, why I am so anxious, why I am so filled with trepidation, why, frankly, I'm not able to sleep comfortably at night. I'm not able to get sleep for, you know, maybe an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours each night before I go to sleep. We have got an opportunity of a generation, if not more. And that opportunity is a golden geopolitical opportunity. Deng Xiaoping grabbed that opportunity when he understood the importance of the Soviet schism with the US. And the Kissinger, Nixon, not Kissinger really, actually it was Nixon who had some friends in Hong Kong and who he knew very well, who basically convinced him to reach out to China. Kissinger was initially opposed to it, but naturally, like Kissinger being Kissinger, any policy that's successful, he says it's his policy. Any policy that fails was Nixon's policy. But it was very much Nixon's policy. But Nixon basically wanted to reach out to China. And in that, I can tell you, Deng Xiaoping recognized an opportunity that the United States did not recognize in the 1950s. In the 1950s, 2 or 3 times when there were American visitors, Mao told them, you know, I like to swim in the Yangtze, and someday I would like to swim in the Mississippi River. Now, I mean, they didn't get it. What does Mao mean when he says, I would like to swim in the Mississippi River? Maybe Mississippi River is a river full of boats and full of crowds and hardly a river which is worth, even looking at, forget swimming in. So they thought that Mao was being, either polite or quirky. Mao was giving a signal in the late 50s, after the Korean War. Look, we want to come to an agreement with you. The Soviet Union is not our friend. And remember, 4 or 5 years later, the Soviet Union under Nikita Khrushchev fought with Mao, and they had a schism. And I mean, not public for some time, but which is de facto there. Mao was signaling that, look, you guys, I want to do a deal with you. And the Americans, of course, didn't understand that. I think it was Eisenhower at that point in time. He didn't understand that. I don't know if Kennedy, if he had been alive in the second term, would have understood that. I do believe Kennedy was a very smart president, and he was learning very fast as he went along. And he was, for example, totally in favor of saying that Churchill was totally wrong about Indian independence. He should have supported India. He was very pro-India, if I may say so, although it didn't count for much in '62. But the reality of the situation is that that message was missed. This time, Nixon did not miss the message of the ping pong team being invited. Nixon, a friend of his from Hong Kong, a lady in Hong Kong, called, do you know, Dick, what this is all talking about? What? It means that the chairman wants to basically, come to an understanding with you. He said, what do you mean? With the United States. And Nixon called Kissinger, and the rest, as you can say, is history. Today, I can tell you, the best opportunity comes from a schism between the superpowers. And I have long predicted this, that look, there is a de facto schism between the United States and China. The Chinese have understood it for a very long time. And I can say one thing, Giridhar, I go to the United States, I go to China, I must confess that, somehow, despite the fact that sometimes, people, our own officials go there and say, don't meet this guy. He has nothing in government. He has nothing to do with government. But then they tell them, look, yes, he knows. He said that to us, that I have nothing to do with government. I don't know why you're repeating that. No, if he has nothing to do with government, why are you spending time with him? I mean, that's how little they know about the process of gathering information and gathering knowledge and gathering perspective. That's all they know. But despite all that, I do have people, good friends, built over the decades in China and the US and in other countries. And the Chinese were from the start very clear. We know that someday this honeymoon is going to end. That someday it is going to be an open confrontation. And we have to prepare for it. In fact, when the trade war was launched in 2017, if I remember, Donald Trump's trade war, my wife Lakshmi and I visited Beijing. And I make it a point of visiting Beijing from Taipei. The Chinese like, somebody coming from Taipei as much as we love people coming from Rawalpindi straight to Delhi. In other words, they don't like it at all. But they're very polite people, so they gave hints to some of my friends in India. The Chinese think that maybe you shouldn't be so, going to Taiwan so often. And why go to Beijing from Taiwan? There are so many flights from Bangkok and, from Kuala Lumpur and Singapore and from Delhi. Why do you need to go from Taipei to Hong Kong? Well, I used to just ignore them and say, look, because the flight is the most convenient. The China Airlines flight takes off around 2 in the afternoon. Very convenient for me. I hate early morning flights. The Beijing flight takes off at 3 o'clock. And I love that 2 o'clock timing. So for that timing, I go to Taiwan. I've got people in Taiwan. I have meetings in Taiwan. I go there and then go to Beijing by an afternoon flight. And I reach there well before dinner. So I can have dinner with my old friends in Beijing. And we can start discussing about things from the time I land. So I've always got by with that. But, I just want to make a point. I'm Indian. So I've gone there frequently. And I would like to say, I like the Chinese. I like the Americans. I like the Chinese, frankly. And I met some of the people who are basically if I may say so, in the core of in the advisory group. These are mostly people like you. They're young, they're in their 40s, they're bright, they're exceptionally committed to their own country. And they know my views on America, like the Americans know my views on Iran, forget China. My Jewish friends know my views on Iran. I'm very close to them because I think if you talk frankly and you put your cards on the table and you're very unlike officials and you don't carry an agenda of the government or messaging which they have seen already from the government and through various so-called non-government people who come on behalf of the government or behalf of somebody who's in the government, well, I think they have more respect for you. So Chinese know my views on America very, very well. They know my views on Taiwan very well. The Americans know my views on Iran. They know my views on China. I said, well, this is an interesting thing, this trade war. So my own views, I think Trump is going to, there are some by-elections happening and whatever it is, I think 2017, there was a by-election year. So before that, I think he'll come to some kind of an understanding. He said, a guy who was talking to me, a very important advisor to the top man, who, I mean, once or twice when we were meeting, he was summoned to go to the top man's office. I'm not going to mention the name of the top man because I don't see any reason for that. I think all of you know the top man in China, the top man in India, the top man in the United States. And I would like to say on one of my visits, the Chinese took me to the guest house where Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi was staying. They took me into the boat and they showed me pictures which are there in the hotel, in the guest house, and in the, very proudly displayed on Prime Minister Modi. I think he's the only leader who has been displayed in that fashion. So I think the Chinese have some respect for Prime Minister Modi. It's very, very clear. Xi Jinping has respect for Prime Minister Modi, and I think the same is reciprocated. But having said that, they gave me a book to read. It was not easy for them to find that book. So being important people, they moved, heaven and earth in Beijing. That book was out of print. The book was Mao Zedong's treatise on protracted war. Professor, the day before Lakshmi and I were to fly back to Delhi, and I'm happy to say that the Air China flight to Delhi is civilized hour. I think it's 8 o'clock in the evening, Beijing time. So around before, I think, 1 o'clock or so in the morning, you reach Delhi. It is okay. You can go to bed by around 3:34, and that's civilized for me. I prefer to follow a civilized schedule. Some people say because of my feudal background, others will say because I'm lazy. I don't care, but I like civilized schedules. And unless I'm absolutely forced to, I don't like to change into uncivilized schedules. But it was a book on protracted war. What they were telling me was, Professor Nalapat, don't be under any illusion this is going to end soon. This is war. And that book was on war between China and Japan. An existential war. When I saw the book, and that evening I had dinner with some friends of mine. In fact, an Indian friend who was married to a Chinese girl and lives in Beijing, and an American who's also comes from, he's half Korean, half American, but fully American. There was nothing serious to discuss. But when I saw that book, it was a special assistant something came, located me in the tea shop and handed me the book and said, "Sir, Professor Nalapat, this book has been, I've been asked to give you this book, and before you leave. So, sir, this is the book." So I said, "Okay, give me the book." I opened the thing, and it was on protracted war. Look, they knew from the start that Trump had declared war on China. They were not. I went to America soon after that. They were not aware of that. I don't think even Trump was aware that he had given a declaration of war. I don't think Trump was aware, frankly. But the Chinese were, either they were aware of it or they interpreted it. But from then on, they began preparing for all-out war. And do you know what are the two lessons that Mao Zedong said? There's a long story about how to fight the Japanese. Mao was a very good military tactician, but he had two rules for people around him to fight a war. He said, number one, avoid giving high positions to people who believe you will lose. Any war, no matter how hopeless, if there are people around you who believe you will lose, make sure they are removed without delay. That's what Churchill did, by the way, when he removed Halifax and the appeasers from his cabinet and brought in people who most of them thought they're going to lose the war, but they said better to perish fighting than to basically die of old age as slaves of Germany. So rule number one, don't employ anyone who believes you're going to lose. Rule number two, don't use the services of anyone who believes it's going to be an easy victory. If someone comes to you and says, "Sir, we are so much stronger, we are so much tougher, who are these stupid guys? We can take care of them. We are, chosen by destiny. We have got this great people behind us. It's a matter of something, we'll just roll over them." Those people are to be avoided as much as the defeatists. the triumphalist and the defeatist. I want around me only realists. People who look at the situation and they say, we don't know the way, but we will find out the way, but we are confident that we will be able to find out a way. It's going to be a hard, long, tough way. Many of us will die in the process. The country will suffer horribly in the process, but we will win this war. And that is what, frankly, that is what the book I was given told me. Now, we all know Xi Jinping has been reading the book of Mao a lot. I think he's also been reading the book of Deng a lot. But frankly, from then on, I had no illusions about this being anything other than a war. From that time, I have been doubly certain, something that I was certain for a very long time, frankly. You know, up to around the handover of Hong Kong, unless you were a geopolitical friend of the United States, you were never a prosperous country. China, any country, you name any country that was prosperous, Japan, South Korea, any country that is prosperous, you had to be a friend of the United States. By about the end of the 90s, you had to be a country that was actively doing trade with China to be prosperous. If you're not doing trade with China, you are not prosperous, So these are realities of life. So the reality of the situation was, I have been convinced for a very long time. In fact, Narasimha Rao, I think, he's, Narasimha Rao, I mean, I love the man, but he was such a secretive person. Even he never used to confide anything to anybody. I don't know if he confided to his closest thing, but certainly he used to tell me a lot, but not a lot. But from the beginning, he was aware that, look, we need the Americans as an ally. There's a gentleman called Subramanian Swamy, and I think all of you know him, and he's not very popular in certain centers. I mean, he has been given no responsibility at all in the government. He has been given a member of parliament thing. I'm not sure if he'll be renominated in 2022. As of now, my guess is not. I wouldn't bet on Swamy being renominated in 2022. As of now, maybe things will change, who knows. But way back when he was a minister in Chandrasekhar's government, India was in desperate straits. That was in 1990. Now, I know Swamy from before that. He was commerce minister. What I like about him, he and his wife Roxana, when Lakshmi and I used to come, at that time we didn't have a place in Gurgaon. That house came ready in 1993. We didn't have a place in Gurgaon. So he stayed in the India International Center. He and his wife used to come to the India International Center. And Swamy used to basically, I think if I remember, he used to drive himself. And when he was a minister, so I think he had a gunman with him sitting in the back or something, but he and Roxana used to come and visit me and Lakshmi like that. The only other person whom I've seen, when he was a chief minister, coming to our house in an old white Fiat, we stayed in bank house, my father's bank quarters, was Sharad Pawar. Sharad used to come with his wife, Pratibha, very charming person. He's got a very charming and talented daughter as well. And Sharad used to come a long, long time since I've been in touch with Sharad. But in those days, Sharad used to come and visit us, driving his own car. And if I remember, Sharad didn't even have a gunman with him. When our house was next to Mantralaya, but there may have been some cops around, but in that little Fiat car, which Sharad used to drive, there was no cop around. And from there, he drove to the chief minister's residence, not to Mantralaya. So he must have driven quite a distance. I mean, I've never seen ministers do this kind of thing, frankly, except Sharad, when he was a chief minister of Maharashtra, long back, and Swamy. Swamy basically cut a deal with the Americans that we will allow your flights to refuel. You support a bailout from the IMF, a bailout that will stabilize the economy. He got various people under his leadership, Montague and various others, to design a blueprint for reform for the economy. And Yashwant Sinha was the finance minister at that point in time. For some reason, I don't know if it was still Mr. Vajpayee or somebody else, they blocked Swami from being the finance minister. He was given commerce and law by Chandrasekhar. Swami knew Rajiv Gandhi very well, so Chandrasekhar could not keep him out of the government, so it's commerce and law. He cut this deal with the Americans. And of course, you know what happened. Somebody leaked information to the Times of India, and Times of India carried a very big piece, and Rajiv Gandhi made a very big fuss about it. Now, Rajiv, I mean, was a wonderful man, a wonderful chap, a good friend. But all I can say is I don't think geopolitics was a strong point. So he made a big fuss about it. But by that time, the IMF loan had already been sanctioned in internal IMF papers. I think that was a good trade. I think Swami acted in the Indian interest. And frankly, I don't see any problem in allowing the Americans to refuel. Where's the problem? You know, we pick up foreign exchange. We pick up enormous goodwill from the largest economy in the world. But, you know, to the coal warriors and to other people who are living in romantic things about the past, well, this is horrible. So a very nasty piece was written in Times of India as though some terrible crime had been committed by Swami and Chandrasekhar. That American planes, I mean, you know, for God's sake, you know, they're not Pakistani aircraft coming to bomb us and being refueled. They were American planes flying in and to go to the Middle East and to do something which the UN had mandated the United States and the coalition to do, and which India had supported. So anyway, that's a different matter altogether. But what I'm saying is, he saw an opportunity. He grabbed Yashwant Sinha, poor chap, did not know how to bring the Americans to their side. Yashwant Sinha is a wonderful man, but you know, I mean, again, like I said, Swami looks as an opportunity, and he understands the Americans very well. I think, frankly, if you look at, you have to understand the mindset and the chemistry of a people. You can't just understand just the language or read in books about their culture or even stay there for 2-3 years without the chemistry, the mindset coming into you. And that's happened to Swami. He knows their mindset. He knows their culture. They're an extremely transactional people. So he offered them a trade. We'll give you this, India, coming in from the non-aligned world and giving you this. And in exchange, you give us this. They said, fine. And it was done. And that is what saved the economy. And of course, Manmohan Singh got the credit, which he didn't deserve, frankly. It was Swami who did that particular trade-off. And one day, hopefully, when the government files are released, till now, successive governments have kept a tight lid on their files, mainly to hide the stupid mistakes that they have made. And I'm surprised even this government is not even releasing all the records relating to Subhash Chandra Bose or to what happened in Tashkent or so many other things, I'm sorry to say. I don't know why. I don't know who's being protected and why they're being protected. But I would like to, personally, I trust the Indian people. I trust our ability to escape any kind of trap. And I believe 99.99% of this information that is presently hidden can be safely revealed to the Indian people. I believe that. But all I can say is, today we have a golden opportunity. And I've seen this opportunity right from that period. Ever since in the 1980s, I saw China as a rising power. And please understand one thing. There's a very charming lady in Taiwan called Madam Hung. Madam Hung is actually the leader of the very pro-China group in the KMT party. KMT party is generally pro-China, but the most pro-China group is led by Madam Hung. I think I'm the only non-Chinese whom Madam Hung condescends, if I may say so, to visit her on my visits to Taipei. And she's always good to be with and talk to, because I want to understand what this pro-China lobby is thinking. I want to understand her view of the relationship, her view of other things. I would like to understand multiple views and then finally put the jigsaw puzzle together. I don't want to throw away a piece of the jigsaw, but then I'll never put it together again. Why does she meet me? Because Giridhar, long back, I mean, I have written a lot of stuff, I've said a lot of things, and you know, sometimes I've given some talks, as you know, sometimes in those days in my, if I may say so, Bombaya Malayalam, in some cases in Bombaya Hindi, in some cases in Indian English, whatever it is, in my usual incoherent way. And among the many things I said, I think in 1987 or something, was that by 2027, the ethnic Chinese are going to be more important in global geopolitics than ethnic Europeans. Now, I mean, frankly, I don't remember what was my reasoning behind that. What was why I said, 2027 and not 2026 or 2028 or 2029. Please don't ask me that. It was a eureka moment. And that somehow, when I went to China, for example, I was invited to give I'm just talking about multiple things as jigsaw, because we're all working at jigsaws. And we don't know which piece is important. A piece unimportant to me may be very useful to you, and vice versa. So we should never sneer and scorn at any jigsaw, and never kind of, prejudge jigsaws. And the reality situation is when I went there, Beijing Review wanted to do an interview of me. It's a government publication, very prestigious. And again, I am one of the many, as any official will point out, I have no relationship with the governments at all. Frankly, I've had some pretty hostile relationships with some of the governments, especially Mrs. Sonia Gandhi's government. Of course, I must say that even then, the national security establishment used to frequently reach out to me. This national security establishment has never reached out to me. The national security advisor, I had one lunch with him in the beginning of the term, and that is the first and last time I ever had any meeting with Ajit Doval outside some wedding or other things. Obviously, because he's a brilliant man who understands geopolitics, who understands security, who understands China and all these countries much better than I do. So there's no point in his wasting his time with me. So, I mean, the previous government, had this thing because some of them were foolish enough to believe that I had something which I could basically, some knowledge, some jigsaw would be useful. But Mr. Doval has all the jigsaws all the time with him. So he knows that I'm pretty useless to him. So he's never met me after that one lunch. I called him 2 or 3 times, and I follow a dictum. I call a man twice, I call a man 3 times, and the third time, if I don't get a response, I never call him again. And that was several years ago. I think about 5 years ago. My third call was about 5 years ago. But, I just want to say very frankly that we have this golden opportunity. And we have had this opportunity for a long time. And that opportunity is, I saw the Sino-US schism as a golden opportunity for India, because I looked at the Indo-Pacific. And for me, from day one, unlike for some other people who write and all that, Indo-Pacific has always been the full Indian Ocean and the full Pacific Ocean. It's not been one part, of the Indian Ocean and one part of the Pacific Ocean. No, it's the full ocean. Primacy in the Indo-Pacific is very important for an alliance where India is a major partner. If we don't have that primacy, then an alternative alliance is the primacy in which we are not the partners or not the major partner, we are in trouble. We should have primacy. The only way, in my opinion, to get that partnership is the United States. And from the 1990s, frankly, I saw Narasimha Rao make approaches to the United States. I saw Bill Clinton reject them because Bill Clinton was obsessive. And I'd like to say that I think the Clinton Foundation has got a lot of money legally from India. Indians love the Clintons. Indians love Kissinger. We seem to love anybody who has done nasty things to us. And we seem to ignore the people outside who have done good things to us. A different matter. I mean, the Japanese, celebrate Radha Binod Pal. But I'm not sure that we celebrate the unknown people who have stood up for India across the world. I don't think that even the time of day is given to them, and many of them may not even be given a visa to come to India. When you have people who have given money to the Khalistan movement and to the Kashmir movement who are given, visas to come to India. It's a different matter altogether. I have a different mindset on this. But this is an opportunity that I said we have. From that period, I can tell you, I have been very clear that we need a security alliance with the United States in order to take full advantage of the Sino-US schism. In 2017, when I was given this book on protracted war, I realized that that opportunity is now there in golden letters in front of us. Frankly, I believe in 2003, Vajpayee should have sent a division to Kurdistan. If the division was to go to Kurdistan, Kurdistan is a peaceful thing. It will remain peaceful. The Kurds were sitting on oil. We would have got that oil at very low cost. If we had bought Iran oil, we would have got that oil at very low cost. I don't believe the Americans would have done anything on us on Iran. If I could explain as a tiny little citizen to hardcore Jewish friends whose entire life's mission has been the destruction of the mullahqasi in Iran, that why I can't join that particular crusade of theirs. And they understood that. I was sure the government of India would be able to find people. And Jaishankar is an extremely talented person. He's a very articulate person. I'm sure Jaishankar would have been able to understand, to basically, articulate it to them. And we didn't have really got so nervous that we stopped buying oil from them and put Chabahar at risk. Now the Chinese are looking at Chabahar, and frankly, at any time it may go to China. So something built by us may go to China. Something built by us may go to Taliban, which means Pakistan. In Afghanistan, it's a different matter altogether. Well, all right, 2003 we didn't do it. Let's forget about 2003. Let's talk about this government. And I repeat, I am still hopeful about Prime Minister Modi, frankly, ensuring that India go on a superpower path. Certainly, I don't see any other leader in sight who is potentially capable of that path. You have to have an alternative. If you want to talk of options and you want to talk about this thing, you have to have alternative. I don't see any alternative to Narendra Modi. And may I say that in 2013, I wrote a very strong piece warning Modi about Arun Jaitley. Some very important people called me at that point in time and said, what have you done, sir? We respect you. We want you associated with us, but you have just ensured that the new government will have nothing to do with you. I said, look, I'm not 18 years old. I'm a little older than that. I understood that. My duty is to do, or as I say, what I believe is best for a man I admire, which is Narendra Modi. I told Narendra Modi 10 years before he became PM, I remember 8 or 9 years, that look, Narendra Bhai, you are going to be Prime Minister of India. You better meet people who can help you during that time. You better go in for policies which can ensure that India becomes a superpower at that point in time, because you are going to be Prime Minister. I did make another request to him, and that is that when you discuss who is going to be a national security advisor, think about all the options. I didn't suggest any particular option because obviously I would not like to plant any idea, but I told him, think about all the options when you're choosing your national security advisor and when you're choosing your ministers and everything else. I said this to him when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat. He always found him a wonderful man who's been always very polite to me, very cordial to me, the very few occasions that we have met, whether as Chief Minister or Prime Minister. And he just laughed at me and said, what are you saying? I'm Prime Minister. I'm never going to be Prime Minister. I said, no. And then I used to bring people occasionally to meet him, whom I thought would be helpful to him in a future government. Unfortunately or fortunately, none of those people are involved in his government up to now. None of them. At least none of the people I brought to him are involved, although in my view, they would have been good to get involved in various ways, but they're not involved. What I'm saying is, he is the only viable alternative we have. But it's important that we, like I did in 2013, we say what we believe to be what we believe to be the path forward. Maybe that path is wrong. Maybe it is completely wrong. But if we believe something, I think we are, some of us, all of us, whatever, varying degrees or whatever, but still, I think it's our responsibility to be, as far as possible, truth tellers to those in power. I go back to after us. I go back to Indian history. A Maharaja, a Maharaja in ancient India used to have courtiers. They were dressed in brocades, they were dressed in silks, they had jewels, they had jewelry, and very lovely lifestyles. They were courtiers. At the same time, the Maharaja, again, pardon me, 45 degrees is too much.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to finish this, Girdhar.
Yeah, sure.
Maharaja had what we would call Rajgurus. And these were people who used to live in forests, who used to have no possessions, who used to have matted hair, who seldom wore slippers or anything. So very rarely would the Maharaja dare to call a Rajguru into the palace. He would go himself to the Rajguru into the forest, get his body, his beautiful dress dirty, and sit down with the Rajguru for several hours. And the Rajguru would tell him precisely where he was going wrong, where he was doing all right, so which he should continue, what he should change. And then the king would come back to the palace, again be among his courtiers, and all the courtiers would look at him and say that, wonderful. The question is only, it's like an IAS or IFS or an IPS, if I may say so. I think your evaluation forms. Either the officer, if his officer is simply good, he's rotten. He's either good or very good or excellent or super excellent or outstanding. Good means you're rotten. Excellent means you barely manage to manage. Let's be frank, So that is frankly the ancient history of our royal courts. So occasionally the king had to go to the Rajguru. I hope Prime Minister Modi has got his Rajgurus. And I hope these Rajgurus do not come in, with big fancy titles and fancy vehicles and things like that. I hope they come from very humble backgrounds. Or he goes to their houses, like he goes to his mother's, the little flat that his mother lives in, rather than his mother coming to his house. And he goes to there and he finds out from them. Because I wrote something about Bill Gates in Sunday Garden, I think saw a few days ago, about Bill Gates being an ardent advocate of the lockdown. I mean, Bill Gates is an ardent advocate of the lockdown. Johns Hopkins is an ardent advocate of the lockdown. Imperial College is an ardent advocate of the lockdown. WHO, the Director General of WHO, by the way, before anybody in the Chinese Communist Party knew this guy, he used to be a good friend of Bill Gates. Bill Gates appointed him as a trustee or board member of one of the first institutions he set up. And if you're appointed to the board by Bill Gates, I think Bill Gates is a good boss. He makes sure that you're well looked after. And Bill Gates, if I may say so, I wrote a very nice piece about him because I do admire the man. He's giving his money away not to his children. He's giving his money away mostly to charity. But I've told his wife, is a very wonderful woman, and maybe she's the influence behind that. So don't get me wrong. But I simply want to say that, look, in all fields, you have to understand where people who the shoe pinches, where the shoe bleeds, where the shoe cripples. You have to understand from them. And frankly, Bill Gates can stand a lockdown for roughly, I'm not very good in mathematics, although I've done mathematical statistics and I think I'm reasonably okay in mathematics. I think nearly 1,000 years. His lifestyle he can maintain for 1,000 years with a lockdown. But how many of us can maintain that lifestyle? My lifestyle, I can tell you, my income, I can tell you, has gone down sharply during the lockdown. And I'm luckily, we are not, entirely in the sense devoid of some assets that hopefully we'll be able to find buyers from, in the future if the need arises. But I can tell you that I am relatively better off. I am living in our place in Gurgaon. We have a small place in Kerala, and I'm living with some staff, etc. And we are living people and a reasonably okay life. So, but in my own income has come down substantially, and I know many people whose income has completely gone zero. Not only this period, but may I point out, Giridhar, pre-existing conditions are a comorbidity, if you ask me, is basically the problem with COVID. That if you get, COVID and you have pre-existing conditions, then you are in deep trouble. And we have been having pre-existing conditions well before we got COVID. And many of those pre-existing conditions are because we have not managed to dismantle many of the regulations and policies of the past. And we have not been able to institute minimum government. The Indian people are as capable of the British people of doing wonders if they are liberated. I have seen, and you talk to some friends of mine, talk to, our friend Rajan, K.S. Rajan, who was a good friend of Abdul Kalam, whom also I knew. In fact, I wrote a piece in 5 or 6 languages. Abdul Kalam should be vice president and Alexander should be president. Sonia Gandhi vetoed Alexander because he was a Christian, and she thought if he's a Christian, he'll not be able to make me a Christian prime minister. So she vetoed him. But Kalam luckily became a president of India. That's a great thing, a wonderful thing actually, which Vajpayee did. But we have discussed so many stories of people in Hyderabad, young scientists, technicians, who have come up with their ideas and have not been able to succeed and have been forced to go to Singapore and other places for their ideas to take off. So this has to be done. You understand, Giridhar? So this is my point. And I believe the only person who I believe can do it is still Prime Minister Modi.
Yeah, but what should he do? Now China is staring down our throat. The dragon is breathing down our throat in, Tibet, Ladakh border. So what do you see this? I mean, do you see this escalating into some kind of a war? How do you see this pan out?
Giridhar, I can only say one thing very carefully. I've seen some images of where the Chinese are. I think they're a very short distance away from Daulat Beg Oldie airstrip, which I believe is their target. And they're so close that they can practically hit that airstrip with a slingshot. If that is the case, then the entire operational value of that airstrip gets thrown into doubt. Just as the operational value of Chabahar gets thrown into doubt if Iran turns its back on us because of our lack of buying their oil, or Afghanistan goes to the Taliban. I am only pointing out, in 1971, there was a gentleman called Durga Prasad Dhar. Again, my grandfather on my mother's side knew all these, Mrs. Gandhi very well. So he used to go and talk to Mrs. Gandhi, and he used to also meet Moraji Bhai, used to meet various others. I remember during the emergency, if I'm not mistaken, the Marxist Party, Deshavani, did not get newsprint. I think V.C. Shukla denied them newsprint. I believe Mathrubhumi, because of my grandfather's orders, ensured that they got newsprint during that period. And because it was Mathrubhumi and very pro, very pro Indira Gandhi, the authorities did not dare to act. The authorities who didn't know our relationship with, and however small it was with the Gandhi family, my mother, myself and all, but my grandfather was not molested. And he, I think that is one reason why I think the Marxist Party, when they keep talking about class enemies and that, they have to understand that some of their distinctions are crazy. Because, you would never have expected my grandfather, who they call as a class enemy and this and that. And frankly, I am not a great fan of theirs. I used to be, as editor of Mathrubhumi, a strong critic of the Karnakaran government. Karnakaran was an uncle of mine. During emergency, I'd like to say, he was very helpful, to my mother. But when there were problems in his government, when there was corruption in his government, he was very close to me. I loved the man. We used to write against him in Mathrubhumi. And Karnakaran, being Karnakaran, nothing happened. As soon as 9R came and the Marxists came, lo and behold, the managing director, who was very much with the Marxists right from the beginning, very hostile to Congress. I don't know, he may be a Congress supporter now. I don't know. At that point, he was very hostile. He and the people who were pro-Congress suddenly became pro-Marxist, and they all conspired to throw me out. Why? Because I insisted that the paper will remain a fair and balanced paper. I said, I'm giving my journalists 95% freedom. 5% directors and their interests, we will not touch. The remaining 95%, I'm sorry, we will touch. And the paper will do investigative reporting. And we did quite a bit of investigative reporting about the Marxists. And that was too much for Mr. Nayanar, too much for the individuals who are talking about freedom of the press now, who are talking about human rights, who are talking about, the need not to suppress free speech. But may I also point out that, I've had another experience when Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. And at that point in time, quite frankly, I don't think Mr. Brajesh Mishra was very helpful to me because I didn't think very well of Mr. Mishra. I thought Mr. Mishra, frankly, was not a good choice, very frankly, as the National Security Advisor. I think he was too much in the ancient regime or ancient thought. I thought, too much old thought. So I don't think, whatever the reason, I left journalism altogether. Thereafter, Organizer gave me refuge. Radiance, the journal of Jamaat-e-Islami, gave me refuge. And lo and behold, a newspaper in Pakistan called Pakistan Observer used to give me refuge. Frankly, we have stopped writing for Pakistan Observer some time ago because I think we both decided that our views are too far apart for each other. I never used to talk about India, Pakistan in my columns, but somehow I think the reviews were too much for me and I stopped writing for Pakistan Observer. And they also, frankly, stopped bothering me. I think they also realized that I think our views are too diverse for me to write about, to write in that particular paper. So I stopped writing there, frankly. I would like to say they've been good to me, except for 2 or 3 pieces. They have not blocked any piece. They've done very little editing. But when a certain time has been reached when I feel we have to go on the all-out offensive against Pakistan, I recommend nothing less than the breakup of Pakistan. I cannot in conscience do that and keep writing for a Pakistan paper. So I think by mutual consent, and a Pakistan paper also cannot write with somebody who's constantly writing about the need to divide Pakistan. And I mean it. So, and the paper which is writing very nasty things about India, divide India. So we had an amicable parting of ways. But I simply want to say, I got very little help from Mr. Vajpayee, quite the opposite. In the case of the time when I was in the Mathrubhumi, Rajiv Gandhi knew me very well. He's met me several times. He was a wonderful man. But there's a gentleman, who was some people in the security establishment. They were very close to some journalists in the paper who immediately switched sides and joined hands with the new powers and basically started spreading stories or whatever about me. A lot of fake stories, unfortunately, as usual. And they were believed. And as a consequence, Rajiv also was not a person who could challenge his bureaucrats. When a bureaucrat came and 3-4 bureaucrats said, no, he's good, he's a rascal, he's done this, he's done that. He did give me some indication of what I'm supposed to have done. Frankly, I said, this is so insulting. I'm not even going to reply to it. I think this is absolutely. And some of the politicians who told him that were themselves the most crooked politicians. Well-known crooked politicians, well-known crooked bureaucrats. The point is, the people who throw the knife into you are the crooked. When the people who throw the knife into me are honest people, I'll be worried. When the people who dig a knife into me are crooked people, I want to say one thing. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that knife. Yeah. And I invite them to, to put more of their knives in.
Yeah. Nalapat ji, if you could specifically talk about the current China crisis.
See, I can tell you very simply, Giridhar, why I talked about DP Dhar.
Are we going to take a hit? Because
we have already taken a hit.
Yeah.
We have taken a bad hit across the border continuously because they have been following a forward policy for the last 15, 16 years and inching their way forward. Now that's a different matter. Let me say that DP Dhar worked out an agreement with the Soviet Union. It was not popular in the bureaucracy. They said, we are non-aligned, we can't sign a pact, we are peace-loving, we are Gandhiji's children, this is almost a military pact, it is a military pact, how can you do this? Mrs. Gandhi was very cold-blooded. That's what I liked about Mrs. Gandhi, very frankly. She was, when she wanted to do something, including clean out her party and completely take control. She was very cold-blooded about it. Very charming and very cold-blooded. He said, look, I want to go into Pakistan and save those poor Bengalis. I mean, I take her word for it, that her heart was completely, overwhelmed with sorrow at what was happening, the genocide in Bangladesh. That is possibly true. And the only way I can do that and keep the Chinese from attacking us is to ensure that we have an agreement with the Soviet Union. There's no other way we can keep the Chinese from attacking us when this rascal, I don't want to name, that it was an American president, but when this rascal, Mr. XYZ, wants to finish us off, and his domestic servant, a gentleman who's very well respected and who's been given a lot of contracts in India, who's wined and dined whenever he comes to India, whom Indian people basically fall over themselves to try and get a few minutes appointment. I won't name that person also. That domestic servant of his is keeping on telling the Chinese to attack us. I think, the information that Mrs. Gandhi used to get, one thing about Mrs. Gandhi, each week, P.N. Haksar, with all his other problems, he used to say, I would like the Prime Minister to meet 6, 7 people who are completely out of the ordinary, completely outside her range of interest, her range of society, random people, people who are technically ordinary or whatever, in different walks of life, and give an hour to them, 2 hours to them, 3 hours to them, individually, and listen from them. So that way she gets a different perspective on the world. And I don't know, Mr. Haksar has told me when I was very young, if I may say so, a young boy. And I used to go with my grandfather to meet Mrs. Gandhi. And somehow Haksar also met me, and I used to write for Mainstream as a very young boy, as a teenager. Nikhil Chakravarti used to indulge me. I wish his son would, locate all my articles in Mainstream and then please, publish them or put them online or give them to me. I love his son because I love Nikhil Da. I was a teenager, a young teenager, and he gave me pride of place in Mainstream, a paper that was really widely respected in the, at that time in Delhi, and made my name a household name. Everybody was shocked. Is this so? Are you MD so-and-so? Are you some-so? What the hell? Who the hell are you? Are you this kid? And even today, when I write under Madhav Nalapat, many people say, you've got a very bright son who's a journalist. They don't realize that Madhav Nalapat is the same person as this old guy who's meeting them. What I want to say, today, let me tell you a situation. The Pakistanis have convinced China that I am very keen on getting back POK. I have never talked about getting back Aksai Chin. I know that some of you are going to be dislike this intensely, but let me tell you, I've never talked about getting a Rolls-Royce car or even a Mercedes or even a Ford. I've only talked about getting a better Maruti car. So I know my limitations. Frankly, if we fight a two-front war, hopefully we'll win it because of interior lines of communication, because of our Jawans. I believe we'll still win it. We'll hold our own even against China in a two-front war. I would like to avoid that, frankly. But the Pakistanis have convinced the Chinese army, and the Chinese army has always been very influential, Chinese leadership, that look here, guys, the POK is not just our struggle. If Indians take over POK, they are also going to move. The next will be Aksai Chin. First POK, then Aksai Chin. Now, I don't know if this is true or this is not, because as I said, I have no entry into the process of government. I remember once Amit Shah, August 6th or August 5, made a statement in the Lok Sabha that, we will take back POK and Aksai Chin. And I think in 3 minutes, he said Aksai Chin 2 or 3 times. I don't see any other, frankly, statement where Aksai Chin is also mentioned along with POK. But possibly that statement was used, possibly something else which I don't know about was used. And I don't know if Aksai Chin is on the agenda. I certainly hope POK is on the agenda. But if I were advising this government, I'll say, for heaven's sake, concentrate on POK. Concentrate, as Deng Xiaoping said, build your strength. Build your strength. Very clearly, hold your what do you say? Hold your power, build your strength, hide your power, bide your time. I would say that very frankly, as an economy which is less than 3 trillion. Frankly, that's what I would say. I've never talked about taking back POK. I've talked about POK. I've never talked about taking back Aksai Chin, frankly. But I would like to say that given this fact, that I do believe a large section of the Chinese establishment is now of the view, wrongly, and they have many times been misled by the Pakistanis, in my view, wrongly. I don't know, Mr. Doval knows, Jaishankar knows, Amit Shah knows, the Prime Minister knows. I'm not in that inner group at all. I don't know. I don't know if they're, it was serious that, but he read what the point was. It was in the Lok Sabha. It was from a government paper, if you remember, a government paper. So, we may see this as an internal thing. We are saying something which will have an internal effect. Now, Mao talked about swimming in the Mississippi. The Americans completely did not understand that. Now, Amit Shah is talking about, Aksai Chin. Aksai Chin is part of Kashmir. It's very much part of Kashmir. In fact, the Maharaja of Travancore, Maharaja Travancore is my wife's family, Maharaja of Kashmir. One of his titles is, if I not remember, Tibet Adipati, the Adipati of Tibet. So if you go by the Chinese logic, the whole of Tibet belongs to us. If we go by that logic, large part of Southeast Asia and South China belong to us. If we go by their logic, different matter. But I don't know if Mr. Amit Shah was looking at an international audience or a purely domestic audience. I know that Mao's message was misinterpreted. Possibly this message has also been misinterpreted. This first by the Americans and this time by the Chinese, because from that time, frankly, after September of 2017, frankly, each time I used to, I think it was 2019, 2019, I remember that statement. Each time I've gone to China, and it's not too many times, 2-3 times or so, because this COVID thing has come, I found the attitude to be a little different. Not that we discuss India or the border or anything, we discuss global geopolitics, we discuss so many other things, but somehow the body language, somehow the vibrations were not very good. So I think I knew that GHQ Rawalpindi has been giving this wrong line. I don't know. I hope it's the wrong line. I don't know if it's a wrong line. I hope it's a wrong line. If it's a wrong line, I think it should be made very clear to the private that's a wrong line. Because frankly, from that time onwards, if I know, they are preparing for the worst. And the Chinese Communist Party core leadership always talks the best and prepares for the worst. The Americans sometimes do the worst, I don't know, they prepare for the worst. Frankly, they do quite a lot. They're pretty smart guys, the Pentagon and even in state. And even Trump, in my view, is still the best president. I don't know. But I can tell you, Giridhar, that I'm no longer sure that we won't have an India-China conflict. I'm no longer sure that China will not automatically come inside of Pakistan. And I regard it as inevitable that one day India and Pakistan are going to go to war. I regard it as inevitable and necessary. Not just inevitable, but necessary. After a process of assisting the Baloch, assisting the Sindhis, assisting the Pashtuns, I did that in my last Sunday Guardian column, if you remember, and to have a dignified life. And the Muhajirs, minorities are hardly any in Pakistan. And again, I would like to say I'm a little surprised why, with all the resources available, Government of India has not compiled volume upon volume upon volume upon volume in the internet about Pakistani atrocities. There are so much wrong atrocities attributed to India. Atrocities attributed to other people are put on India. But we don't, the atrocities by them, hardly anything comes there. I don't know what this policy is. But let me tell you, in my opinion, the only way to drive out wrong fake news is to overwhelm it with true news. Not just say one statement of true news and say, this is true news, I know it, my mother knows it, my grandmother knows it, nobody else need know it. I'm sorry, perception is what counts. If the object of your true news doesn't know it, you're not made any success at all. Frankly, looking at the miserable press that India, and especially a Prime Minister who I love as a human being, Narendra Modi, is getting, I feel very sorry about this. As I said, I've said before in P Gurus, I've said it twice, I'm sorry, but there's a bit of trash around Mr. Modi. There are some people outstanding, there are some people who are trash. He should expand the number of people outstanding and remove the people who are trash. But I've said in P Gurus, there are people whom I regard as trash around him. And I think I've been warning this from the very beginning. I have no hesitation warning it now. And frankly, I'll tell you, my relationships are relationships of friendship. They're relationships across decades. If you read my stuff and then you don't like me, you're welcome not to like me. I hardly give sources. I mentioned about Kim Jong-un coming into public the day before he came to public. I mentioned about something happening to him and he came into public. Maybe coincidental, maybe not. Maybe my sources are good. You can laugh at me and say, I have no source. I've said so many things. China and US going to war. That China is looking at a reset of the US dollar. China is looking at its own currency strengthening itself through digitalization and through blockchain and through gold. And all this is now coming true. At that point in time, I think in the Reserve Bank, everybody had a good laugh at what I was writing. I'm told people in the Reserve Bank read me and at least they pretend to laugh. And I'm told there were lots of laughs when I said that, China is challenging the dollar. The Americans are challenging the Chinese economy. They want the Chinese rate of growth to come down to 3%, 4%. They believe with that rate of growth, the Chinese Communist Party will lose its legitimacy. Then the core of the leadership will lose legitimacy. Xi Jinping will lose legitimacy. So for both, let me tell you, Girdhar, it's an existential struggle. And for both of them, it's essential for China not to have India as an American security ally. It's essential for America to have India as a security ally. And guess what? We are a lovely, sentimental people. You know that Prithviraj Chauhan was a very sentimental man. You know the Rani of Jhansi, after she defeated initially, she went around many temples. The other side started preparing their tactics to fight her again. And Prithviraj Chauhan started going to one triumphal march after the other. The other side started preparing for war, and he planned a war in which he attacked early morning when nobody used to go to war. He went to war and the soldiers were sleeping, and in various other ways, a very inferior army was able to destroy a superior force. What I want to say very frankly is that, look, we have to do this, I can tell you. We have to have an agreement with the US, a security arrangement. And that security arrangement, it is now very possible because, and what is happening now? I've been looking at India as an alternative defense platform for the United States. I've been, as an individual, talking to people, and frankly, I'll tell you, Manipal, we have extensive contacts in the United States. Many people in the government don't like those contacts. I don't know why, because we've been a very patriotic nationalist university. We have strongly supported. MV Kamath and MD Nalapat used to write freely in Organizer the most nasty things about Sonia Gandhi. When Sonia Gandhi was all powerful in the government, and Ramdas Pai has supported MD Nalapat and MV Kamath, and my Manipal, my people who are now Vice Chancellor, people who are Pro-Chancellor have supported me, supported MV Kamath during this time. So some people in the government think that there's something wrong with them. I would like to say, I don't agree. I respectfully disagree. I don't know who these chaps are, but as usual, I'm sure that these are all, I've seen the way fake dossiers get prepared. I would like to say, my experience of these people, they are patriotic and they have planted the flag of India across the world in a high quality way. Whether it is Satya Nadella or XYZ, we have planted the flag of India in a very, very, very patriotic way. And I think we should be celebrated. And I salute Prime Minister Modi for having recognized us and made us an institution of excellence. I think only the Prime Minister would have done that. And that's what I'm saying, Giridhar. I have complete faith in the Prime Minister. And that is why my advice to him through this channel is basically that, look, we have to have a security alliance with the United States. Just as in 1971, we could prevent a Chinese attack. When an inevitable attack comes from Pakistan, because the Pakistanis are, fretful people. They're trigger-happy people. They'll jump the gun, as they did in 71, you remember. It was Yahya Khan who launched the first move, not Indira Gandhi. I mean,
Pathankot and all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When that happens, I am no longer confident that the PLA will keep out. And when I see them coming right next to Daulat Beg Oldie, which is an airfield which will be crucial for us in case of a second front, and when I see their recent moves and their recent, and the recent diplomacy, I can only say, I can no longer, say as an analyst that I am 100% confident that the Chinese will not join the Pakistanis in quote unquote administering a second humiliation to India. Now, again, I want to say we are our national security in the hands of a man whom I know well. Ajit and I have been colleagues in this Action Committee Against Corruption in India. I met him several times at VIF. Dr. Swamy has been the chairman. A lot of corrupt bureaucrats and some politicians have been taken down by the committee. And he is an outstanding man. He has been very active in the war on corruption. And he has written several hundred articles about China. And because he knows China very well, I think every one of those articles have been extremely strong about the danger that China poses to India. So he's negotiating with China, and obviously, based on his writing, it is very clear that he is fully aware of what the Chinese are, and I'm sure Chinese will appreciate that. And even though he has been writing against them, I'm sure they'll deal with him in a proper way. I don't know how much progress has been made in these national, talks with all these IPS and IFS officers as special representatives. What progress has been made with the Chinese side? If there is progress must have been made, they must be kept secret for some reason. I don't see any outward sign of progress. I saw something in Wuhan. In fact, the Chinese took me there basically, basically because they know I love Modi, and I'd be happy when I see how much respect they give to him. And I love him in the sense as one of millions of Indians who love him. He's not a friend of mine. I think if I go into a room with as many people as we have, I don't think he'll be able to make me out. He might have to, at least 10 minutes he'll take. Nalapat. I remember him, maybe. But I'm only saying he's still the best choice. But let me tell you that window is closing. Because that war is probably coming sooner than we think. And if the war comes and we have no alliance, we are not going to get the help we need to stop China from joining that war. And unless we stop China from joining that war, and don't forget, I don't know if it's accidental or not, a lot of Chinese troops are now moved into POK.
Yeah.
Before you go to war, you'll have to somehow get them to withdraw. A lot of Chinese troops, they're Chinese troops, they're PLA people. They've gone there. They're supposed to protect the Belt and Road, but many of them are protecting the Belt and Road in the POK than they are protecting in the rest of Pakistan. So there could be a reason for that. I don't know the reason. As I said, I am never in the picture. I am never consulted. As I said, Doval had a good lunch with me. I must say, it's a lovely vegetarian lunch. We had a lovely time. After that, I never met the man. And this national security establishment absolutely has no contact with me, I'd like to say. There are a few people I know here and there who are, part of it, whom I meet as friends. I'm not meeting, not in a sense strangers who come and tell me, sir, we want your perspective. I don't know. I haven't met anybody like that. So obviously, because this establishment knows the situation well. Well, to my lay thinking, I'm very worried, I can tell you. And our window opportunity is flying away. And if Donald Trump is no longer the president, and if you have Joe Biden as president, I'm not sure that Joe Biden as president will even sign that kind of an agreement. Despite the fact that the Pentagon wants him to sign it, and the state generally wants him to sign it, because Hillary Clinton has a very poor opinion of India. She thinks India is the much overhyped power. And if you check the, these papers in WikiLeaks, there's some mention of articles of mine in WikiLeaks, and mention of me in the cables between the Hillary Clinton's people and U.S. Diplomats and all that, because I am seen as one of the descriptions was a rabid right-winger. Now, frankly, I don't know if I'm right or left. I hope I'm right most of the time, because I'd like to be right rather than be left out of the truth. But I simply want to say, and if I'm rabid, I don't ever remember catching rabies, and I hope I'm not rabid. I am a totally secular man. I have defended secularism. I have defended the Muslim community. I have defended Christians. I have defended Jews. And I can tell you, I have defended Hindus in an era when it was, Giridhar, you're wearing a red mark on your forehead. Until my wife makes me wear that mark. I don't normally wear it, frankly. My wife, makes me wear it. She's a little more devout than I am, and she does enough prayers, but in that sense, but I wear it, and I must say I'm happy wearing it, because I'm happy in my identity as a staunch follower of Sanatana Dharma. When I was asked to go to Saudi Arabia, he said, what is your religion? I said, Sanatana Dharma. And I said, are you sure? I said, yes, Sanatana Dharma. And that is my faith. And I'm proud of that faith. I'm truly proud of it. But I want to say that my Hindutva theory of Vedic, Mughal, and Western, I don't think the Vedic period is going to be overshadowed in a fair recital of the three periods, the way it has been overshadowed now, and is still being overshadowed by our pedagogy, much to my regret. I mean, even the Ram Janambhoomi.
We shall revive it, sir. We shall revive it. We shall fight to revive it.
The path of Lord Ram to Lanka is celebrated in Lanka and not in India. That path should have been built 70 years ago. It has not been built. Let me tell you, even today, the Ram Setu is not being declared a national monument. Look, please don't talk like a member of the, like an admirer. I mean, I admire the judicial system. Our judges are completely, honest. They're straightforward, and they're so hardworking. Each case takes decades. As I write, grandchildren become grandfathers before a case is decided. How long are we going to wait, Giridhar? Tell me. I don't know how long you can wait. I don't have that much time. You may have more time. I don't have that time. I'd like to see it become a national monument. I'd like to see a Ram path. I'd like to see our history go back from myth to reality. Yeah, I'm somebody who says Ram and Krishna were human beings, they were not gods. Fine. But they were there. They were not myths. And this is what they did. And we should teach what they did to our young students. Panchatantra and so many of the Shastras. These are invaluable lessons of life which will make a good citizen. And in my humble opinion, if you had another Vivekananda, another 2-3 Vivekanandas, and Vivekananda got a lot of help, frankly, from Christian ladies in particular. He got a lot of help, and he took that help. I think by now I can tell you, Sanatana Dharma would have been 2 to 3 billion people would have embraced Sanatana Dharma. 2 to 3 billion people. I remember long back, I wanted Jagadguru Shankaracharya of Kanchi to visit China. If I recall, it was in 2001. Throughout for 18, 19 months, I used to go to China, and I've done this. I've been, I talk as a person, as a nationalist to nationalist track. I regard the Communist Party as the most nationalist party in China. And they saw me as a genuine nationalist, sincere guy, not a party man. I said, why don't you invite the Shankaracharya? He's a holy man. Religion is important to Indian people. You are always telling me ad nauseam that you want friendship with India and friendship with the Indian people. I am a UNESCO Peace Chair. I am interested in friendship between India and China as the first UNESCO Peace Chair in India. Why don't you invite him? Finally, they said, okay. Finally, the Shankaracharya's own nephew came 2 or 3 times to Beijing, and we worked out the modalities. He would get the same protocol as a head of state. Remember, the Pope has not even been invited so far to Hong Kong. The formal invitation was sent to Shankaracharya as a head of state. He would be put up in the Zhongnan High Compound where cabinet ministers, or not even then, prime ministers are put up. He will be treated as a head of state. The food will be prepared from food brought from India every day by his own cooks. And I don't want to talk about other arrangements, but they were all very satisfactory to the nephew. And finally, reported back to the Jagat Guru, who I admired a lot. I admire Balaswamiji also a lot. For me, in fact, Kanchipuram is a very, very wonderful place, and I have tremendous inspiration from Kanchipuram, Balaswamiji also. And I would only like to say, why did I want him to come there? Because I sensed that the Chinese people are now hungry for something spiritual. It was a vacuum, and that was being filled by the Christian church very effectively, and still very effectively. I think there must be at least 200 million people there in China, if not more, who are Christian today, although the acknowledged will be about 20 or 30 million, at least 200 million, at least in my way of calculation. And Buddhists, I think about 300 million people will be Buddhists. It's a battle between Buddhism and Hinduism. If an interest in Sanatana Dharma had been sparked by the arrival of the Jagat Guru there, and he had been, the first holy man to be treated in a communist country as a head of state, the entire world media would have focused on him. And my dream of Sanatana Dharma spreading to the shores of the world would have come true. I don't know what happened. I suspect somebody in the intelligence agency or somebody in the PMO. I know that one of the initiatives we used the Jagat Guru for, it was a peaceful settlement of Ram Janambhoomi, very similar to settlement that took place now. It was torpedoed because somebody in Vajpayee's PMO went told us Jagat Guru and said, don't deal with these. Anyway, that's a different matter. There were some close friends of mine. Some of them are Muslim. I don't want to mention their names now. And they worked very hard for reconciliation, which involved the Ram Janmastan going back to his rightful place. And I would like to say, Giridhar, I am not a superstitious man, but I would like to say, so long as Sri Ram Janambhoomi, so long as Krishna Janmastan, so long as Gyan Vapi in Varanasi are not restored to what they were before Aurangzeb. And let us not forget, the Krishna temple in Mathura was built by Emperor Shah Jahan. It was not built by a Rajput prince. It was built when Shah Jahan was the absolute ruler of that area. And of course, was destroyed by Aurangzeb. In my view, this country will never reach its potential. I am not a superstitious man. I dislike superstition. I am not what you call a fanatic Hindutva activist at all. I am an Hindutva activist. I have no hatred to persons of any faith. I want all faiths to work together. And I've always said, you can't call yourself a Hindu nationalist because a nationalist loves everybody who's truly Indian, no matter what the faith. I stand by that. But I can tell you, Giridhar, if these three places and even today, the Ram Janmastan, I hope the temple comes up. But I would like to see Krishna Janmastan. And I would like to see it take place peacefully. And I'm very confident that the overwhelming majority of Muslims will support, like they quietly accepted triple talaq, like they quietly accepted so many things. I think Nehru made a very big mistake when he did not bring Muslims into the reform thing, because Muslims will also understand the need for reform. And that is why I've been openly praising Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. I don't know the guy. I've gone to Saudi Arabia. I don't know this chap, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, but he has broken away from the Wahhabi tradition in his family because Donald Trump fought the Wahhabis. And then Donald Trump goes and embraces Erdogan. And yes, I'm coming to my point. F-35 wanted an alternative home. Frankly, Giridhar, I'm not going to name my sources. I don't name them to anybody in the government. I think one reason why people are not willing to really deal with me that they consider me more of a journalist than an analyst. And I think that's a slightly superficial way of looking at an individual. But I think, like Sanatana Dharma is complex, an individual is also complex. And I'm glad that my university at least sees me as a professor. And I became, the orders were passed making me a professor and not making me some kind of a guest lecturer as a journalist. So, but I think these guys think I'm a journalist, and for them, journalists are the enemy. The journalists they feed, the same people they feed, and that vomit is reproduced in columns. A lot of it is vomit, because I know a lot of it is fake. They are wonderful across the different fields of government. But I can only say, I'm sorry, journalists are not the enemy. The people are not the enemy. Civil society is not the enemy. We are not your enemy. We have to work together. In China, civil society works together. In America, civil society works together. These are the two superpowers. We are in their path. We have to learn to work together. So forgive me. This is the chance that we have. And what did we do? We set up this S-400. The S-400, first of all, don't be romantic about the Russians. The Russian Federation is not the USSR. And today we believe that we can openly talk to the Russians about a future war with China. And the Russians, of course, say Chinese are rotten people, awful people, terrible people. We hate them. We dislike them. We despise them. Of course they do. But they are completely beholden to China. They are completely in the grip of China. There are Chinese experts in all the Russian laboratories. There are Russian experts in any laboratory the Chinese want. And as for S-400, whether there is a Chinese backdoor there are some components made in China. Maybe that will be changed or something. But there is a big, beautiful backdoor that China has got into India and it's India's security and strategic system. And that is our romantic view of Russia. The fact is, you have two military blocs now. One led by the United States, the other led by China. And the military bloc led by China has got Russia as the predominant power, Pakistan, Iran, Venezuela, and some other countries. The one led by the United States, India cannot be another Germany or Japan or the UK. We have to be a predominant power, much more important to America than Russia is to China. But we have to be not the primary power, but in the relationship, the predominant power means almost a co-equal power. And this opportunity is there for us with the United States. They changed certain long-standing fundamental laws, basically the fundamental laws which govern their security relationships. We have signed certain laws giving India rights with no other ally of the United States. No Japan, not the UK, not Germany, not Italy has got. They have signed all that. They'll be ready to sign this, making us a predominant power. But remember one thing, there's a time limit. Let me tell you one thing, Giridhar, this is something which half of you are going to be in shock. I want a day in which, for example, long back, I and a chap called Lawrence, who's in the Christian college in Madras. I like Lawrence. He always tries to convert me when he meets me because he believes he loves me, I love him, and he believes that my soul is going to burn in hell in the afterlife if I don't get converted. So, he keeps trying because he doesn't want me to burn in hell. He wants me to join him in heaven. So I'm sorry, but I am risking hell, but that's the kind of individual I am. But what I want to say, we wrote something at that point in time, along with, if I may say so, an assistant secretary in the Pentagon, senior Pentagon officials, and we floated a plan to get the US to give Kitty Hawk to India. That's a 9,000-ton aircraft carrier. 90,000 tons, I'm sorry. That's roughly around 3 times the size of the Gorshkov, Admiral Gorshkov, which we purchased. I think Vikramaditya is something it's called. Now, can you imagine the impact of the Kitty Hawk steaming through the Gulf? The Kitty Hawk steaming across the Horn of Africa. The Kitty Hawk mooring in Japan. With our jugaad, we could have kept that thing afloat for 20 years. Today, there are at least 20 ships which are mothballed by the US Navy, never used, which we can keep floating for at least 20 more years. Let me tell you, Giridhar, our Navy has to double in size. We don't have the money for that. It has to triple in size. We don't have the money for that. Our Air Force has to double and triple in size. We don't have the money for that. Our army has to go in for high-tech weapons. We don't have the money for that. Frankly, if you look at the average cost, some of the aircraft we bought, let's be honest, it's pretty high. We had to pay that because our national security was at stake, and so there was no other choice. So it was a well-considered choice, and we bought it. But it was very expensive. But with these prices, we can't afford the extra squadrons we need. Double, triple the number of squadrons we have. How do we do that? We do that by India becoming a platform for the production of US weaponry. F-35s could have moved seamlessly from Turkey to India. Why? Why did they move from Turkey? Because they bought the S-400. S-400, Giridhar, if there is a war, they'll be used, of course. Of course, the Russians hate the Chinese so much that the Chinese who are swarming around the S-400 factories, Russians who are in communication with the Russians who are in communication with the Russians, in communication with the Russians who are technicians in our S-400 batteries will not communicate anything. Our Russian friends are like the Soviets, they hate the Chinese. Let's assume that, and let's assume it's true. But, even otherwise, we need an expansion of our army, navy, and air force. And we need the beginning of that expansion to basically have a psychological edge over Pakistan. And let me tell you, armies are won by a psychological edge. Hitler tried to create a psychological edge against Britain. He got that edge against other powers and lost. He could not get it against Britain. He won. We, in 1971, we got an immense psychological edge against Pakistan. Pakistanis were half-hearted. Of course, in Simla, the Pakistanis got a psychological edge over us, and we gave away in victory what we had won. We gave away in their defeat. They got what they had lost in our victory. That doesn't matter. What I'm trying to say, this is a surveillance system. The S-400 can map any flying platform, any space platform, even a big bird in the sky can be mapped by the high-flying bird. I'm just being facetious, but I'm saying almost anything that's flying can be mapped by them. It is 24/7 a surveillance platform. As I understand it, that information flow will be going straight to Russia and the Russians will give it to us. Or maybe going also to Russia. And of course, the Russians are decent people. They are people of their word. I know them. I respect them. The Second World War was won because of them. Let me tell you, in 71, they were instrumental in our winning. They have built up our defense industry. It's a different matter that today Nashik is now on the verge of becoming a ghost town because as an aircraft production facility, it doesn't know where's next line of production. I wanted F-35 to be the next line of production at Nashik. I wrote that. I wanted first F-16s. A lot of airlines, aircraft, air forces use that. So first you build your F-16s like Turkey has built. Sell it all over the place. Make money and buy more. Or buy from yourself your own F-16s, which will be at a lower price. And the Americans, Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, Raytheon, Lockheed, they have to come to India because the way the Sino-Russian alliance is catching up with them on price and quality, I can tell you, including the S-400, it's a magnificent system. Including the S-400, they'll be priced out of the defense market in about 7 to 8 to 10 years. So they know that. They want India as a platform. But for that, we have to sign the foundation agreements our own way. We have to be a partner. Supposing you give power of attorney, you give it to your brother. You give it to your lawyer. I mean, some guy comes and says, I am the lawyer, but I'm not going to, say in writing, I'm your lawyer. Or I'm your brother, but I'm not going to admit in public I'm your brother. Are you going to sign that power of attorney? Because you're transferring very sensitive data. You're transferring technology. You're transferring platforms. You're transferring power. And let me tell you, we need that transfer of military power. We need it badly and we need it now. And the only way is the 71 Security Alliance. We at that time, Soviet Union to keep China at bay. Today, and I'm talking as someone who admires the Chinese Communist Party, who has many friends in the Chinese Communist Party, and who has always talked and regarded Xi Jinping as a very powerful leader like Deng Xiaoping and Mao. I'd like to say we need the American alliance to ensure that we are not attacked by the PLA of China when we attack Pakistan or when there's an Indo-Pak war, which in my view is going to be an inevitable, unless we roll over or accept some terrible levels of terrorism. I mean, a certain thing we can't. I wrote in my column that the Chinese should not think this is 62. Nehru and Krishnamanan thought they'll never attack. B and Malik thought they'll never attack. They attacked. Today the Chinese should not feel the same way. You're pushing us to a point where we may attack. And as I said, I mean, if some of my Chinese friends are angry with me, so be it. Some of them are angry with me because I flew in from Taipei, so be it. Some of my friends are angry with me because in America, angry with me because I'm very friendly with many people in the Chinese Communist Party. And some Chinese are angry with me because one of my best friends is Gordon Chang, who's among the strongest hawks in China. Fine, that's me. I'm that kind of personality. I'm a private citizen. So that's what I am. If you don't want me, don't take me. If you don't want to accept my views, throw them out. Say they're rubbish. If you don't want to meet me, don't meet me. But I'm not going to change. I'm just saying, this is the opportunity. The same opportunity that Deng grabbed, Modi has to grab. When Modi came to China, to Shanghai and Beijing, I wrote in Sunday Guardian, this is the Deng Xiaoping of India. If he has to now be better than Deng Xiaoping. And
I wish so. I really wish so. He grabs the opportunity, but we can only pray. We can hope and pray that he grabs the opportunity and we don't miss it. I really agree. I mean, this is an area where we've had too many missed opportunities, at least in the last 70 years.
We have bought S-400. The minute that is installed and operational, the chance for a high-tech security alliance of Americans is down the tube. It's over. And the Chinese know it. The best gift that Putin can give Xi Jinping is to ensure that there is no strong security alliance between the US and India. It's the best gift he can give it. And S-400 is that gift. Of course, another gift is 5G. And I said, Huawei is the best system, frankly. It's 40% cheaper. It's much more efficient. And any telecom company that goes into Huawei will defeat any telecom company going into any other system in India. There are only 3 telecom companies now. 2 of them are in the ICU. Only one is barely, able to walk around. Let's be honest. It's also Huawei. But again, Giridhar, if we have bought S-400 and installed S-400, then okay, we've already taken a decision. We are never going to be a core security ally of the US. Then you get the cheaper system also. My preference would have been different. My preference would have been very different. And you all know what my preference is.
Yeah.
But if that is if S-400, if you're operationalizing, then you may as well go Huawei as well.
Yeah, true.
Because what is important is metadata. You guys know, I mean, like I said, I only meet people and they talk to me in detail and I get something from them and my students, my colleagues, I'm delighted by them. And I said, we are a very patriotic university. We want to keep India going, and that's our department of geopolitics. We tell everything from an Indian perspective. We have many foreign students coming to listen to us and understand what an Indian perspective is. I just want to say, I mean, very clearly that, that this is the choice before us. Yeah. That if you get S-400, well, then we are in with the Chinese, the Sino-Russian alliance. But in security, I can tell you, Giridhar, we'll never be part of that alliance. Why? Because Pakistan is a core member. I could never support an alliance with the United States on security during Narasimha Rao's period because Pakistan was a core element in the American security alliance. After 9/11, that changed. I know the American attitude. I mean, I have a few people in the Pentagon whom I still know, back from the time of Andy Marshall, who's the great legend of the Pentagon. Andy used to find time for me when I used to go to DC. Of course, he's often disagreed with me, but he had the patience to listen to me. And then he would tell me, look, I don't think you're right, but I find your views very interesting or terrific. And I'd have some good cups of tea and there'd be some aid of his or something. And then I'd be escorted out because in Pentagon, unless you're escorted and escorted out, you end up being shot at when you come near the building. So you have to be escorted in from a far distance, escorted out. But Andy was he was a wonderful person, great brain, open to anything, any kind of suggestion. And like, for example, Churchill was when he appointed this guy, Turing, to head a thing which an entire establishment against it. And Turing did it. He had a scientific advisor, Churchill, who nobody liked. And it was that science that won Britain the war. What I'm trying to say, that time is flying by. The minute this thing becomes operational, we'll have to plan for an era in which we are never going to be a security ally of the United States, and the Pakistan army will know it. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, sure. Shall we take a few questions? Tulsi ji? Tulsi ji, yeah.
Yeah, I'm here. Yes, Giridhar ji.
You can ask your question, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Madhav ji, it's been an extreme delight to hear you for last almost now 3 hours, and if somebody is saying that you are only a journalist, not an analyst, God, what analyst means, I don't know. But my question is with regards to, how do we change situation in India where independent intellect thinkers who are genuine and honest, they don't remain sidelined. And now that we have the power of internet, and why is it that there is no team building among such individuals in the country? And as you rightly used the word rascal for people like Chidambarams and the intellectually corrupt people, they continue to run this country. And what is your take on it? Intellectual integrity people, how do they become powerful in the country now, so that their views are precisely taken up by the policymakers? Thank you.
Tulsi ji, in my opinion, our nationalist community is growing by the year. I became a nationalist early on in my life. I would not say in the 1970s, definitely not. But by the 1980s, I became, in my view, an India first. And I wrote also India first in Malayalam. Then, of course, I was removed from Mathrubhumi, then in English in Times of India. Then I had to leave Times of India. But then in Organizer, a lot of my pieces have come in Organizer. In those days, I can tell you, we were a small community. We were a fringe community. Today, we are the mainstream. In those days, I was considered to be an extreme nationalist. I don't know what is, I don't see if a good thing can be extreme. I mean, frankly, I don't think nationalism, Americans are nationalists. You go to Canada, you find no Canadian flags. You go across the border of the United States, every house, every car, every road has got an American flag. They advertise their nationalism through their flag. Of course, in India for a long time, we were prevented from waving our flag, and it is Naveen Jindal, who's in the Congress party, who gave us the right to wear that, to have that flag, and I'm glad. Many rights are still not there for us, including transparency about so many things, including, for example, the Prime Minister has been speaking about, ensuring that, what do I say, people outside talent comes into the administration. My own views, at different levels, you have, for example, why don't we have in the defense ministry in India people from the military? Okay, don't get you and me, get military people. Incidentally, people like you and me there in the Chinese military even, in their military council, in the Pentagon, there are lots of civilian people at very high levels, along with people in uniform. But there are no people in uniform in the defense ministry except a few people who frankly they don't have much of a role. So you have somebody who has come in from fisheries, somebody who has come in previously who began as a collector somewhere, in some maybe Ooty or something, and then he's moved on to agriculture, fisheries, and finally he's been promoted and he's moved on to to defense or to home. And maybe he's 2 or 3 years before a politician doesn't like him and he's removed from there. But for a good prime minister, at least, he doesn't remove people, he keeps them. I wish he had kept more of the people from Gujarat. His Gujarat team was wonderful, frankly. I know many of the people in the CMO. I know almost nobody in the PMO, but I know many of the people in the CMO. And I know some of the people in the PMO and the CMO, but I can only say that they're wonderful people. And there are such wonderful people. So I do hope that this thing happens. What I'm trying to say, very frankly, the Prime Minister has to ensure that his word is followed. His word is that you will seed the bureaucracy with 25-30% of people from outside. So today what is happening? Today you're looking at, for example, judging the suitability. I mean, the way it operates in practice, I'm not talking theory. You have about 8 or 9 retired, serving bureaucrats. The same 8 or 9 get together. Then they talk to about each of them as 2 or 3 retired bureaucrats who are their friends. So how many are there? About 30. So there are about 40, 45 people. The same lot of 45 get together and discuss, ye acha aadmi hai, Tiwari to badmash hai, अरे Nalapat बिल्कुल बेकार है, वो तो क्या, and certain adjectives which I've heard used, which I know have been used, which I don't want to repeat here because there are ladies present. But I simply want to say that, why? Because the same group, you're talking about outsiders coming in. If you look at many of the people who have been appointed, the agencies that are now getting a lot of outsiders, they're all friends and friends and friends and friends of friends. Or worse, relatives. Or friends of relatives of friends. Or friends of relatives. Or things like that. This is the way to choose. Choose openly, like the United States does. Choose through the internet. Have an open public hearing. Anybody who thinks Nalapat is a rogue, let him come on the internet and say it and show his face to me. And if I am a rogue, and who knows, maybe I may be one. I've been hiding it from my wife all these years, but maybe it needs to be, she doesn't think so. Thank God for that. And I'm really grateful for that because this lockdown would have been intolerable. But for the fact that very unusually, Lakshmi and I found ourselves in the same city. We normally don't stay in any city for more than 2 or 3 days at a time. And on average, 5 or 6 trips, every month minimum, usually much more. But fortunately, Modi ji was kind enough to impose a lockdown when my wife and I were together in Gurgaon, the same place. I'm not on my campus. I'm not in Trivandrum. I'm in Gurgaon, but I'm very happy, frankly. And I like Gurgaon. My voting card says Haryana, so I now consider myself an authentic Haryani.
Haryani Jat now.
No, I'm proud to be Haryani because it's a great state. And
let's hope someday these changes do happen, sir. But
for his own sake, as an inspirational figure, look, don't be like the Shankaracharya of Kanchi, who gave up an opportunity which I had, and his nephew also, poor fellow, worked very hard over 2 or 3 visits. Nephew was still there in Kanchi. Balaswamiji also must be knowing all about it because he was very much part of it. Balaswamiji was not there, only Shankaracharya. Can you imagine the global impact of the Shankaracharya of Kanchi visiting a communist country that is still denying a visa to the Pope as a head of state, with top leaders meeting him and greeting him and then lecturing on Sanatan Dharma? Can you imagine the impact all over the world? Because CNN, BBC, even Al Jazeera would have had to record him, and he gave it up. I'm only saying the golden goblet comes to you once to your lips. If you don't give it, if you don't drink of it, the entire people will suffer. And the tragedy of our history has been, whenever that golden goblet has appeared, many times our leaders have not even noticed, much less drink.
Indira ji, please go ahead, madam.
Hello, namaste, sir. My question is, why India was not chosen for Security Council permanent membership when China was chosen? Who was there in the China? Was it Kuomintang government or Mao? And there is a campaign that Jawaharlal Nehru campaigned for permanent Security Council membership for China all through. But did they get before that or after that?
Madam,
that is one question. And about POK, when you said, if we can we take back POK, and what are the implications if we wage a war? If we wage a war, it is a big economic cost. And the other thing, we both are nuclear and other nations may also join. And right now, our economic condition is not that good. It's not conducive. And with a weak economy, how can we go forward and wage a war? That is my question. And moreover, we have to win back the hearts of the people. What did the USSR do? Russia do? It took all the states after Second World War. It sees this thing merged, but then again they broke away. So we have to win the people's hearts also if we want to take back. And internally also we should have peace. And they must be ensured that Muslims are looked after well. What do you say about it?
I fully agree with you. And definitely I would like to say that, you have seen a very peaceful Eid, and you have seen Muslims largely stay indoors because very few Muslims are Tabligis. But somehow some kind of a thing spread that Muslims are like Tabligis. Tabligis are fortunately not like the overwhelming majority of India's Muslims. If they were, we would have had a problem. Look at Eid. It's been a very peaceful Eid. They have mostly stayed at home. Saudi Arabia has completely closed itself in Eid. Makkah and Medina are closed, and Muslims have accepted it all over the world. So I would certainly agree we must have communal harmony. Regarding, unfortunately, let us be frank, we were offered Security Council by both Russia, USSR, and America separately. It was given to Kuomintang, China. And the Americans would have given to us if we had agreed to be a security ally of America. That was a little before America, we flatly refused. And once we flatly refused, they went and they said, okay, we have nothing to lose. We are going to be a security ally of Pakistan. And they went to Pakistan. Thereafter, that door was shut for us. So that is what happened, frankly. And Nehru campaigned for Communist China because he believed Communist China can be a good neighbor. And he believed, of course, correctly, that the Communist China was represented China. The whole of China, frankly, and only Taiwan was there, which is not really, had never been, in a sense, part of China in any real sense of the term, except very notionally. So Taiwan was under KMT. So but let me tell you one more thing. I believe in loyalty to friends. I believe in friendship. And may I say that, in my own case, I think I've been loyal to my friends. You're talking about Chidambaram. You're talking about Subramanian Swamy. Chidambaram became the finance minister. This individual who has just spent 4 months in jail and seems to have got a ticket, and now there doesn't seem to be any danger of going back. And frankly, 4 months in jail was a pretty small price to pay with the amount of things that he has done in the economy. Well, he got a criminal case filed against Subramanian Swamy. And he sent the police against Swamy to catch him and arrest him. I was then in the Times of India. Swamy is like me. I'm like him. I would say some people are like that. I think, I like, Gurumurthy also with all his, I don't agree with many of his economic ideas, but as a human being, he's been a very doughty fighter, and I respect that. He came straight to my house, and my wife and I were there and said, look, this is what's happening. This is the warrant, and I'm going to be sent to jail. So can I stay here, until whatever? And we didn't know until what. So he's a good friend. I trust him. I respect him. I have enormous respect and regard for him. And he came and said, okay. And my wife also said, okay, fine, no problem. So we had a spare bedroom. We don't have kids. And he was in the spare bedroom. And every day, Lakshmi would drive him in the car, and Swamy would dress, I don't know, some kind of whatever. And we would go around here and there. And then finally what happened was that I knew Deve Gowda, he was Prime Minister. Swamy also knew Deve Gowda. And ultimately, So Deve Gowda was contacted about Chidambaram's mischief. He found out it's a completely fake charge, a trumped up charge, linking Swami as the controller of Chandraswami. Let me tell you, I found Chandraswami a very good source on many things, and often a horrible source who misleads you, but sometimes a very good source. And so I have met him at his ashram. And then because of that, some people who are against me in the media kept talking about me as a Chandraswami man. I have no hesitation. I get openly at his ashram. I have met him because the guy knew a lot of politicians, knew a lot of officials, knew a lot of heads of state. And he was a mine of information. And from the very beginning, as an analyst and as a journalist, I want authentic information. Sometimes it comes from good people, sometimes from other kind of people. I don't care. If the information is good, I like it. If the information is bad and it comes from saintly people, it's bad information for me. It's of no use to me. So he was falsely accused of being Chandraswami's guide, leader, and mentor, just so that Chidambaram can send him into jail as a political opponent. Now, Swami is one of the best fighters for corruption in India. This government could not do it. Swami is the person who has forced Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi to take bail. When everybody talks about bail Gadi, yes, whose case is that? It's not anybody in the government. It's not the government. And I know from Swami what has happened. Many times, certain ministers in the government, whom I'm not going to name, I mean, some of them are no longer around. They did their level best to protect Sonia Gandhi, including from Swami. Swami fought the case against certain ministers in the government. And I'm saying this openly. I don't know if Swami would like it, my saying this. But then, of course, Gowda was furious. He's a friend of Swami. He was a friend of mine also. And he said, Chidambaram, we must have told Chidambaram, who the hell are you trying to do? And that thing was withdrawn. And Swami, of course, went home. And of course, from that time, he said, I'm going to send Chidambaram to jail. And by the grace of God, the reason why Chidambaram is in jail, frankly, is 99% because of Chidambaram, 1% because of any other factor. Let me tell you. And if you go by Swami, even 5%, Chidambaram will be in jail for 20 years. You've gone 1% or 1% with Swami, and so he was in jail for 4 months. You go by him, 5%, he'll be in jail for 20 years. He's not in jail. Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi are on bail. Rahul Gandhi is a good friend is the son of my friend. I have the deepest regard for him. I don't think he and his sister, if they ever meet me, it will be a problem because their mother will be very unhappy. And therefore, I am also not very distinct about that. But if we have a meeting, I'll meet them, not as Congress party politicians, as people whom I met when they were little kids, when they were growing up, and as sons of and daughter of somebody I held, like Swami held very dear, Rajiv Gandhi. But what I want to say, madam, is, very, very simple. That, when we talk about the Security Council, we just refused it. It didn't happen. And these are the events that are taking place in real life. So I would like to say that I was also accused. Nobody, fortunately or unfortunately, nobody could manage to pick up enough paper to send a warrant against me. It's happened a few times. They've been quashed because, again, they've been motivated by the most dirty, corrupt, rascal people. And I'm sure that these rascals are still conspiring to get me into serious trouble. Our entire family has been investigated, and my wife's family has been investigated by authorities, this regime and the previous regime. And there are officials whom I know to be corrupt, whom I have written about. In one of my articles in Sunday Guardian, I wrote about the daughter of a particular family who's using her official power to get back Benami assets of that particular gentleman. After that, I think the civil servants who are helping us said, madam, we can't help you because these are things. I know these things. I'm an ordinary person. If I know these things, for God's sake, don't tell me the government doesn't know these things. I am aware of it. As far as, I knew bloody well Well, I know I used to be called by some leftists in the Times of India, and I would like to say I admire the left. I respect them. The Marxist Party has, with all its faults, it is in some of its steps in Kerala and all done very well. Bengal has been a disaster, but Kerala, in some ways, family, farm reform and all is done well. I got some Marxists who were good friends of mine, even during emergency. One of the most, I used to meet Marxists regularly during emergency.
Nalapat will take a couple of questions, I think.
No, I just want to say, want to say one thing, that is why I knew that this is a fake charge. I was myself tarred with that brush earlier. I don't know if I without that, I would have had the courage of my convictions. And, and this could have happened. But what I'm saying is, madam, for me and for others who are fighting this war, we are prepared for the worst and let them do our worst, because we have got access to people who will help us to find out. And I will only be worried if somebody honest comes after me. If an honest person comes after me down the chain, I'll be worried. But because crooks come after me, somewhere down the chain, they meet into problems. Crooks come after Swami, somewhere down the chain, they meet into problems. And let me say, Swami has put Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi into problems. 1% of what their problems would be if they were really put into problems. And I certainly hope Rahul is not put into problem. As for Sonia, I think now she's too, sick and whatever. So personally, I frankly have lost all my feelings toward negative things towards her. I was angry with her because I know that she doesn't like Indian culture. She used to make, Rajiv wear jeans, Western food, Western music, Western people. Every Sunday they used to have a brunch. And that brunch, only white people invited. Suman Dubey and his wife were invited because Suman, a wonderful man, a lovely man. He's one of the thorough gentlemen. He's got a lovely family. So I'm not saying anything about him and his wife. He's loyal to Rajiv and Sonia to the end. And all power to a loyal person. He's a very fair man. He looks almost like a European. So maybe he came in. He was only Indian at these brunches. So that is why I never liked her. And such a person is running. I want people who love the Indian people. And down the line, if you meet officials, if you meet even a Tahsildar who has contempt for the people whom he's supposed to be administering or he's supposed to be directing, anybody with that attitude of contempt or superciliousness, or if I may say so, that arrogance, that person should be identified. And the only way is to have a public process of facing the public and going in through that process before you're confirmed in government, whether you are in the IAS, IFS, IPS as the direct recruit, or through examination, or through a horizontal period. I want to see transparency in system, and above all, I want these dirty, ugly, smelly secrets to be brought out. Because listen to me, we are not dirty, ugly, smelly people. Even if some of our people are not got the money to take a bath for 1 month, they're not dirty, ugly, and smelly in the way those people are. I'm sorry for being a little emotional, but you brought back an old memory.
I understand, sir. I can understand. It's very touchy. I think we have actually run out of time. I think we'll close it here. I would request my colleague Chandrasekhar ji to propose a vote of thanks, and then we close it here. It's actually 3 hours 20 minutes actually.
Well, I apologize for taking your time.
No. It was a wonderful journey down the memory lane. That was good, but then I think some people have a call coming up at 8:30. So I think we need to,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for Chandrasekhar ji.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, Chandrasekhar, you need to switch on your video.
Yes, sir. Hello.
Yeah.
Sir.
So,
done? All the questions done?
Yeah. I think we'll just close it now.
Okay. Yeah. Namaste, Madhavji.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It's actually amazing to see you with the same energy at the end of the program. Actually, it's the same thing when you started the program. It's quite amazing and it's commendable. First of all, after listening to your session for the first few minutes, 3 words which ran across my mind were bold, truth, and authentic. Instantly, these are the 3 words which came across my mind. I mean, this is the genuine feeling. And as the quote goes, truth is the property of no individual, but it is the treasure of all men. So I think from today's session, this is what exactly happened. You have actually shared so much of truth from the past, from your life experiences, and boldly, so much of boldness. It was like a quick run around the world, highlighting so many facts from the past. It was just like actually watching a movie, and with a lot of energy you have expressed, whatever you have expressed so far, it's a lot of energy and quite amazing, like I said already. And in fact, in between you mentioned mindsets have to change for India to become a superpower. And I actually wanted to ask a few questions at the time, but now I feel all my questions have been answered because it's quite elaborate and you have touched on so many aspects. Thank you so much for that, sir. On the whole, the session has been quite informative with bold facts, touchy and emotional as well at some points. And this is no exaggeration. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and being with us, sparing so much time. Definitely, we'd look forward to having you on our desk when time permits once again. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this.
I just want to say, be hopeful. This is India. It is a magic land. It is.
Yes.
We have come from the greatest civilization in the world, and one day, this civilization will enlighten the world as Vivekananda wanted it to, frankly. And
correct.
Our tribe is growing.
Fantastic.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. And I take this opportunity to thank all the participants who have been with us. You have given us so much of encouragement. Thanks once again for that.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. And wonderful, Madhavji. Thank you all again. Bharat Mata Ki Jai.
Jai.
Bharat Mata Ki Jai.